Good evening. Welcome to the Planning Applications Committee. Apologies for absence, please. Thank you very much for substituting tonight. Declarations of peculiar interest.
My children have been intermittent members of Wimbledon Rugby Club, so I won't be commenting or voting.
Yes, for the public's information, this is how we operate in planning. The officers will present reports to us, and then we will ask objectors, who will be given 3 minutes each. I think tonight there's going to be a group of 3 who are going to have 2 minutes each, but the agent will then have the equivalent amount of time to respond. Once that happens, we'll go back to officers. Is there any issues that need picking up? And then we move to members who will take questions and comment on the reports. At that point, the public are not allowed to intervene. If you are speaking, we have a traffic light system here. The traffic light, when it gets to amber, means that you have 1 minute left if you're on the 3-minute cycle. But I think that Lisa will call out if you're on the 2-minute cycle. Those people who are affected by that will know who I'm talking to. The order of the agenda tonight, with your permission, members, is, first of all, can I say that the item 6141 Broadway is not on this agenda tonight. It's been removed. So we will take the Wimbledon Rugby Club item first, which is agenda item 5. And then we will take the Hartfield Road Hotel, which is agenda item 9, and then the Wimbledon Stadium, agenda item 11. And then the rest of the agenda will follow as it is in your report. 13, which is the 5254 Wandlebank, will follow the Wimbledon Stadium, and then the rest will be in the agenda order. So that's, I hope that's okay with everybody. So we will be beginning with agenda item 5, which is the Wimbledon Rugby Club, and I'll hand over to officers to present.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the application site outlined here is to the west of Barham Road and to the north of Preston Road in Wimbledon. The site currently comprises several playing fields, hard court, tennis courts, and 2 pavilion buildings. The playing fields are laid out as rugby pitches, largely used by Wimbledon Rugby Club. Vehicle access to the site is via Barham Road, which is a private road up until the junction with Drax Avenue. The site is designated as metropolitan open land, and Drax Avenue Conservation Area is located to the east. The proposal itself is for the installation of an AstroTurf pitch specific to rugby and the erection of 6 floodlight columns, fence surround and storage container. The AstroTurf pitch would replace an existing rugby pitch but be repositioned further south by 17 metres when measured to the edge of the tarmac standing area with the proposal, and east by 8 metres. The pitch would be set flat into the ground, which results in the pitch being raised up at the western end and set into the ground at the eastern end. This would be achieved with a natural grass bank. A 1.2 metre high fence would surround the pitch along the tarmac standing area for supporters and officials. A storage container is proposed in the northeast corner for equipment, and 6 floodlight columns are proposed, each at 15 metres in height, and they would be sited down the sides of the proposed pitch. So briefly talking you through that. So you can see the outside of the pitch where the squiggles are. That is showing the land, where the land banks come down. So on this side, they'll drop down to the pitch. On this side, they'll be raising up to the pitch. The storage containers here. Access to the rugby club pavilion is here. An existing car park is here. Emergency vehicle access is also proposed here to the pitch from the existing car park. This is just a closer up version. In terms of the floodlights, they are 3 on each side, facing in to the pitch. This is the section plan. So I mentioned earlier about the laying it flat within the pitch, flat surface. This is due to the difference in gradient. which slopes down from east to west across the site. So at this end here, for example, is the pavilion end, and at this end is the other end. And over here again, pavilion end. So that'll be the view from the rear. Floodlighting is proposed. This is a floodlight spillage plan which accompany the application. The nearest residential properties are here. These are the ends of their gardens here. This is the floodlight column, for example, 50 metres high. They are collapsible, as shown here. The type of pitch proposed, so it's designed for rugby, so it's got longer grass than, for example, a hockey pitch. Also soft underfoot. This is an example of the type of pitch surface and sort of fencing that would be used within the scheme. Also storage container as well. And this is an example of the floodlights lit up proposed, just really helping it show into a bit of context. Turn to some site pictures. This is the road leading up to the entrance of the car park for the rugby club. That's the pavilion building on the left there. This is the car park, further parking to the east. Just beyond here is the existing pitch. This is the existing pitch here. As I said, it's not replacing it like for like in terms of position. It is moving further this way. So this just gives you a bit of an idea of the site and surrounding area. As I said earlier, sports fields existing. There are some existing lighting floodlight columns on the pitch of the far side there. Looking back, this is the pavilion here. So the pitch would be moving east this way. As you can see, the closest neighbouring property here, you can just see the rear elevation. On a different day on the site visit, just showing the three closest residential properties here. And just a wider view, really. Just from on the outside of the pavilion here. On a sunnier day, so from further afield. And back here. Members, in terms of the mod sheet, you'll see we've had two further letters of objection received, so we've summarised them there for you. Overall, you'll see that the proposal has been subject to a number of representations received, and also has been with the council for some time. Officers have carefully assessed the scheme, seeking further amendments and additions from the applicant to help resolve issues. Overall, the proposal will provide an enhanced sporting facility for the existing playing fields and rugby club. The benefits of the scheme provide an all-weather playing pitch, which would benefit the rugby club and other users of the playing fields all year round. Officers therefore recommend permission be granted, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Can I just say that in the modification papers, there's quite a bit of information about the Wimbledon Rugby Club. So if you'd like 2 minutes to have a quick read through that, please. Just read out that there is recording happening at the moment in this chamber. The meeting's recorded for subsequent broadcast on the Council's website, and therefore, by participating in the meeting, you're consenting to being recorded and to the use of those sound recordings for broadcasting and or training purposes, as these cannot be removed post-recording. If you have any queries regarding these, please speak to one of the Council staff after the meeting. Sounds a bit weird after the meeting, is that?
Yeah, or contact us.
Or contact. Toilets, the public toilets on the ground floor are currently closed for refurbishment. So there are public and disabled toilets in the library if you go through the cafe seating area to where a security guard will direct you. I'm going to move to our objectives now. We've got 3 people wishing to use up the 6 minutes, and I've got Joanna Leake, Jane Watkins and Annabelle Graham-Paul. So I'm taking Joanna Leake first. Is Joanna here? Yeah. There's a little silver button, yeah?
Thank you. The London Plan affords metropolitan open land the same protection as the Greenbelt. National policy requires Greenbelt land to be permanently open and considers development as inappropriate, with limited exceptions, including appropriate... can you hear? Yeah, okay. Including appropriate facilities for sport. The emphasis here is on appropriate. Specifically, proposals need to preserve openness. The 8,000 square metre pitch with 1.2 metre white fencing and 1.5 metre banks will have an adverse impact on the openness due to its location right in the centre of the open space. It reduces access across the space from 140 metres wide to just 2.5 metres wide. This, in combination with tarmac paths, storage, advertisements, floodlighting, will have huge impacts to the openness. Why has no visual impact assessment been provided by the applicant? A verified view would show the clear encroachment on the openness. As a chartered town planner of over 15 years' experience, I don't understand how the officers have been able to make a robust assessment without this crucial information. The officer's report even states that the proposals would have some impact on the current open character, and the refusal of a much less obtrusive cricket pitch in 2016 begs the question as to why this is being put forward for approval. Using community benefit as an exception to Greenbelt policy in this case is unjustified. Club members may benefit, but this does not outweigh the harm to the open space and loss of openness for all other users and the wider community. Dividing the open space with this pitch erodes the edge of the MOL, leaving a disjointed parcel of land to the south, separating it from the main body of the MOL and Wimbledon Common. Given the level of protection afforded to this site's preservation at every single level of planning policy, it's clearly not enough evidence to allow officers and members to make a robust assessment of its impacts.
I ask Jane Watkins to continue, please.
The technical design note of 13th of February was uploaded very late on the 11th of March without formal notification, leaving no time for residents to fully scrutinise it. We've simply not had time to take it on board and prepare a response. This application should not be determined tonight because members and residents have not had time to fully look at it, and we consider we are prejudiced if a decision is made tonight. No travel plan is provided despite a request from the Highways Officer. In terms of sustainability and future planning, why are there no measures proposed to reduce single car occupancy? The hoped for additional spectators to higher level matches has not been taken into account. How will parking be monitored long term? How is active transport encouraged? The PTAL is 0. The aim is for a more intense use of the 3G pitch. Transport statements should cover worst-case scenarios. The date of the parking survey was chosen by the rugby club itself. Parking capacity will fall short. Informal overspill parking of 10 cars in the January report stretched to 178, parking on the grass MOL in September, demonstrating the site does not have the capacity to operate at increased levels without significant adverse impacts. Private streets cannot be considered as parking capacity. A true reflection of traffic flow is not addressed. The narrow roads have no pavements for the safety of pedestrians, residents and cyclists. The officer looks at Saturday with movements in the region of 1 trip every 12 minutes. But in the data for Sunday, between 9 and 10 a.m, Car Park 2 alone goes from 0 to 41 parked cars, averaging 1 trip per 1.4 minutes. It doesn't take account of drop-offs or the congestion as they return. On traffic generation, a model trip rate is used for a 5-a-side team times 3, ignoring drop-offs, spectators, substitutes, coaches, medical staff, netball players.
Sorry, Jane, I'm going to have to stop you. Okay, can I move to Annabelle?
Thank you.
Please, Graham, Paul.
Thank you. I speak on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Bell, who live at 54 Barnum Road, the house closest to the development. I will speak first regarding the previous decision to refuse planning permission for a non-turf cricket practice pitch at the site in December 2016. As you'll be aware, as a matter of law, previous decisions are material planning considerations, and the Council's determination of this application should be consistent with previous decisions. The Council refused the cricket pitch application on the basis that the pitch would result in the loss of grassland and the pitch and associated netting would be detrimental to the character of the metropolitan open land. Residents see no difference between that and the harm caused by the current proposal to remove grassland and intrude in mole with floodlighting. Officers have not considered the similarities with the previous decision reached, and I would urge members to take this into account and act consistently. Second, there are a number of procedural flaws which in my submission would vitiate the grant of planning permission tonight. The first is the late transport information, which residents have not had the opportunity to review properly. It is crucial to the acceptability of the scheme. The second is the number of pieces of essential information missing from the application, as Mr. and Mrs. Bell have set out in their objection prepared by DWD planning consultants. In addition, and more fundamentally, the proposed floodlighting and fence do not fall within the definition of a building or engineering operations, and thus these, by virtue of not falling within any of the defined exceptions in NPPF paragraphs 145 and 146, must be deemed inappropriate development. This too has not been considered by officers. Furthermore, there have been a number of recent appeal decisions where inspectors have found floodlighting harms openness. Any harm to openness, no matter how limited, is harmful and therefore inappropriate development. There are no very special circumstances in this case. I would thus urge members to refuse planning permission tonight or adjourn.
Can I call on Rick Bruin and Meg Gardiner? Are you going to share the 6 minutes you have? Where are you?
We're going to do 3 each, thank you. Good evening, my name is Rick Bruin. I am the Area Facilities Manager for the Rugby Football Union. I'm speaking in support of the application for an artificial grass pitch at Wimbledon RFC. The proposal at Wimbledon RFC is part of the National RFU Rugby 365 Artificial Grass Pitch programme. The investment into the programme is driven by the desire to provide high quality surfaces at community accessible venues all year round that will improve the playing experience for all participants. The programme has undertaken a national strategic analysis of sites that satisfy and contribute to the following criteria. A freehold or a long lease site that will be able to offer the RFU a 30-year lease on the pitch, as the RFU would operate the pitch via a facility management agreement. The national programme of AGP delivery seeks to increase match and training capacity in areas where natural turf pitches are overused. And the programme also aims to improve the quality and consistency of training provision across the country. The National Strategic Analysis examined pitch capacity in terms of quality and quantity around the proposed sites to identify need. The results of this analysis are in agreement with the emerging data within the latest London Borough of Merton playing pitch strategy, as well as supporting recommendations for the enhancement of pitch quality and provision of artificial surfaces. The proposal is identified as having no detrimental impact on the character or openness of the metropolitan open land. NPPF paragraph 89 states that an exception to inappropriate development in the Greenbelt is provision of appropriate facilities for outdoor sport, outdoor recreation, and for cemeteries as long as it preserves the openness of the green belt and does not conflict with the purposes of including land within it. The proposals are for the upgrade of existing facilities at the site. It is considered that there will be no detrimental impact on the openness of the MOL as a result of these proposals, given the location of the new AGP adjacent to the existing pavilion and the provision of existing floodlighting to the west of the site. The proposed fencing has been designed to be as unobtrusive as possible, given it is half open-faced mesh and 1.2 metres high. The proposed floodlighting is narrow and will therefore have very limited visual impacts. The principle of other RFU Rugby 365 projects being acceptable in other areas of Greenbelt MOL is well established. For example, another Rugby 365 application within London Borough of Hounslow at Chiswick Rugby Club was approved in February 2018. This application site was also within MOL land. The case officer for the application found the proposed pitches and pavilions constitute appropriate development within the MOL on the basis that it consists of appropriate facilities of outdoor sport with a built form which helps maintain the openness of the site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Meg Gardner, the Honorary Secretary at Wimbledon RFC, and I'm speaking today in support of the application by the RFU to install an artificial grass pitch, an AGP, at Wimbledon. Wimbledon RFC has been playing rugby on Wimbledon Common since 1865 and at our current ground since the 1950s. We are a community sports club providing a high level of community engagement and social good in Merton. We provide a range of adult and children's sport for both males and females, not just rugby, netball and athletics as well. And we are one of a small number of clubs in the country to run a thriving inclusive rugby section for children with special educational needs. Wimbledon also runs Wimbledon in the Community, which was established to give greater focus to our social responsibilities. The programme allows local maintained school children to experience a high level of rugby coaching, which they otherwise would not have access to. The AGP would help to improve the delivery of Wimbledon's community engagement by having access to a pitch that can be used in all weathers. The better surface will encourage greater participation in healthy activity and will ensure fair access for all. This would be the same not just for Wimbledon, but for plenty of other clubs and schools in Merton. It has been demonstrated through technical studies submitted as part of the application that this proposal will not cause any unacceptable impact on the existing parking and transport situation on site, and it would not increase peak usage at Wimbledon. It is simply replacing an already used existing pitch, in particular the pitches used on a Sunday morning already to capacity. Floodlit training already takes place at Wimbledon on Mondays to Thursdays from 7 to 9:30 p.m. for the club's senior men's and women's teams, for St George's Hospital, and for St John's Leatherhead Old Boys team. It has been demonstrated that the application will have no detrimental impact in terms of light spill or noise. The operational restriction in the planning application, that the pitch will not be used past 10 p.m. and earlier on a Sunday, helps to assist with this. This view is supported by the Merton Environmental Health Officer. Although no pre-application was undertaken, both the RFU and Wimbledon have fully engaged with Merton and our local community, including completing a number of additional technical studies to support the application, all of which are supported by Merton officers. Wimbledon also organised a valuable meeting between residents, Wimbledon RFC, the RFU and Stephen Hammond MP to discuss the rationale behind the application. As shown in the large number of supporting statements submitted, the installation of an AGP would be an incredible investment in Merton. And also, as a local resident of Rains Park Ward, I think the area is lucky to have been identified as worthy of this investment.
Do you want to pick up any of the issues? There were quite a few, weren't there, in there? I move to members for questions, please. Councillor Southgate.
Can we explore why the application for the cricket pitch was refused in the 2016 application. What are the differences from that to the application we're now looking at?
Thank you. Yes, the cricket nets, they were proposed over here, this part of the site. They weren't replacing particularly an existing pitch. They're a brand new facility on the site. With this particular proposal before us, because we're replacing an existing pitch, which will allow all year round participation and essentially enhance an existing pitch facility on existing sports, in existing sports fields context, we have determined that this particular case can be supported, whereas that cricket nets weren't.
Happy with that? Any further questions, please? Councillor Teague.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I was looking through the traffic surveys and the transport planning, and I presume there are events that happen in the club in the evenings up to 10 o'clock, and I noticed that the surveys all finish, the latest is 8 o'clock. Is there any reason why they haven't gone to 10 o'clock when people are trying to leave at the same time? And also, have the surveys been carried out when there's been overspill onto the side roads?
These timings were, we asked the applicant's consultant to consult with RFU what are the worst scenario during the times, and these are the times they say that's the peak times were the worst cases. So on that basis, the consultant has taken the hours as a 9 to 15 on a Sunday, 9 to and a weekend, and the weekdays are 2 to 8 o'clock. Those are the times that RFU says that's the worst case.
Were the residents ever asked what time they think are the worst case? Because this seems as almost biased towards the rugby club rather than the residents, who probably know better when it gets worse for them.
I think that's after 8 o'clock at the most of the traffic disappears. After the 8 o'clock, that's the worst, that's the minimum. So they are not taking the maximum capacity of usage of the parking within the site.
So the residents weren't consulted about what times the traffic service should be carried out?
I'm not aware of that.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's talk about MOL. I wondered if we had any idea at all what percentage of the MOL this pitch will take up, as it seems to be. My understanding of MOL is clearly not what is reflected here. I just wondered if we had any idea of that sort of percentage.
No, we don't have a percentage figure to hand, no. Don't have a percentage figure to hand, no.
Councillor Meakin.
One of the issues raised by residents was the lack of involvement in the parking survey and the delay, the lateness of it. Could the officers respond to that? Why that happened, or if it happened? And
so the parking survey it came out from our highways team. When looking at the application, realised it wasn't an up-to-date parking survey that had been undertaken. So it was it's a document, well, a technical request to inform the highways officers' views. So we felt that we didn't need to reconsult on that. So that is why.
So the consultation was done quite recently then, so that the information couldn't be passed on.
Yeah, so there was a delay in it going on the website because it was being reviewed by our highways officers. But as it's informing a technical opinion, we didn't feel the need to reconsult on it.
Any other questions, Councillor Teague?
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask, do cars park on the grass at the moment, and are parking wardens used at any time?
I don't know if parking wardens are in operation with the rugby club. I have seen pictures in representations of cars being cars being parked on the grass. So yes, we have seen pictures of cars being parked on the grass.
Yes, thank you. Back to this roughly the same subject. I have been involved in another area about, artificial pitches, and I can't understand the logic, because one of the reasons you have artificial pitches is to increase membership and to increase people's usage of that, i.e. you can use it all the time rather than once it wears. And the problem is, going back to the cricket pitch, if a committee decision was to not to allow a cricket pitch, which already takes up more space but is much easier on the eye and on the environment, why do we expect to actually find that a rugby pitch, artificial as it is, because all sports clubs are struggling at the lower levels, and it is a good idea to have artificial, but I find it odd that a committee would turn down a cricket pitch and we might support this. It's quite odd.
All I can say is that they are different. With this particular scheme, there are a significant number of benefits to the proposal. All year round use, encouraging outdoor sport and recreation. The main users of this pitch is going to be the rugby club. Yeah, we do think there are the benefits in this case for us to grant permission.
Please, any comments? Councillor Teague. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. My feeling here is that the survey is very skewed and biased towards the rugby club. And I think another survey should be carried out in association with the residents so that their concerns are taken into consideration as well as the rugby club. And I think I may try and move that motion, but that's, I think, what should be done, another survey. Thank you.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you. On the parking survey, I'm going to assume that on Saturday the 26th of January and Sunday the 27th of January, when these parking surveys were carried out, was when one or more of the rugby teams, or netball teams, but rugby teams playing at the ground were playing at home. And so it would, and the 9 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the afternoon time would take into account all the people arriving and kick-off time, which is normally, 12 or 1 o'clock. So I think it just seems sensible that when the teams are playing at home, those are the busiest times for the club. On changing it to an all-weather pitch rather than, yes, it will hopefully mean more use of the pitch throughout the year, but it's still one rugby pitch. You cannot hold 2 matches on the same rugby pitch at the same time. It would hopefully mean fewer matches are called off because of waterlogging pitch or any of the other reasons you might have to call a match off because of the pitch during winter weather. So it won't mean more people at the rugby club at one time. We're replacing one pitch with another pitch. It just means fewer matches will be called off and have to be rearranged, and it just makes the effective running of the rugby club easier, I would expect. I'm across the board entirely will always support better sporting provision for all the people of Merton. This is not building a new pitch. This is replacing a pitch with a better pitch. And I don't see any good reason to as from all the things in the officer's documents, I cannot see any good reason to turn it down.
Councillor Southgate, did you put your hand up to speak? No. No, I saw you wave, but I thought you... Are there any other comments, please? Yeah.
Yes, I'm quite a different tack on this, but I've looked at the views of the common conservators, who are, after all, perhaps the most closely affected stakeholders in terms of the impact of this on the openness of the site. And I noticed that they are, by and large, content, subject to some comments on the hours in which floodlights might operate. I mean, there might be a question as to whether floodlights should operate till 10, but that apart, I attach quite a lot of weight to their view.
No? In that case, I'm going to move to the vote. Those in favour of the application, please show. Those against and not voting, then the recommendation is approved. We now move on to agenda item 9, which is 27 to 39 Hartfield Road. Do you want a minute? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the application site is located on the western side of Hartfield Road and comprises two-storey terrace buildings for various commercial uses. An existing service road located at the rear of Bewley Road. Bewley Road lies to the north and Graham Road to the south. Graham Road is largely a residential road, and Bewley Road comprises a mixture of commercial uses and residential uses. It's a further existing site plan. Proposal itself is for the redevelopment of the site to provide 3 units with flexible A1 to A4 uses at ground floor level and partly first floor level with a hotel above. The building would be 8 stories in height with plant above. 2 of the new A units would be set over both ground and first floors with one A unit at ground floor only. The hotel entrance will be at ground floor of Hartfield Road, with first floor comprising the reception area, seating and restaurant area. And from second to seventh floor would be hotel rooms, making 177 rooms. So talking through the plans, this is the proposed site plan, also shows the roof plan. So the roofs are staggered in height as the building goes backwards towards properties to the west. Ground floor level, as I said, 3 units, proposed flexible A1 to A4 uses. The hotel entrance at ground floor level, along with stairs and lift here. Proposal includes widening the existing public pavement and also the provision of a colonnade overhang where it could be used for informal outdoor seating for an A3 unit, for example, should they come forward, or for people generally walking through underneath on their way up to the station. First floor, as I said, 2 of the units benefit from a first floor, and there's the main hotel reception and lobby area. And then from second floor above, it is the hotel rooms, obviously including relevant lifts, stairs and linen sections. You'll see the outlook from each room, face to face, obviously out to the front and all to the sides. Outlook is restricted to the west. It's the third floor, much the same, fourth floor. You'll see as we go higher, the roof is set back. 6th floor, 7th floor, and then 8th floor, the plant compound. Turning to the elevations. The proposed front elevation, the building will have double height ground floor frontage set back on the supporting columns, including full height glazing. The columns will be exposed brick columns. Across the floors will be a cream coloured banding separating each floor. The main material for each floor will be exposed brick, which are these, and some feature bricks on the corners, which are proposed to be a green colour, but they will be form part of the materials condition to be submitted to us. The top floor and plant will be enclosed in an aluminium panelled roof, here and here. Window frames will be dark bronze in colour and anthracite grey to the glazing at ground floor level, here. The proposed rear, so it will largely be facing brick, but obviously with the roof materials to match as the front. You'll note that the windows have been restricted. These are the two closest elevations coming towards properties on Graham Road. Turning to the sides, this is the view on Hartfield Road, so you can just see the overhang here and staggering as it goes back. View from Graham Road, properties in Graham Road again staggers up. Should be noted that it is lower down height than the office building to the north. The road naturally slopes up, so it takes that staggered formation. This is just a further detailed plan showing closer up detail really the elevations and the materials. And a section drawing as well from Graham Road. Street scene plans, so office building here further up Hartfield Road. And you've got another office building here lower down on Hartfield Road. So it is obviously clearly a much bigger building than existing, but it does face Hartfield Road and other commercial buildings of similar size. The flat roof elements of the building are proposed to be green roofs with natural planting. Some additional planting is also proposed down the side of the building with 3 trees. And the applicant submitted some 3D sketches with the submission, just to assist with members' determination this evening. So view from Hartfield Road looking south. You can see the colonnades here. And the double height entrance, this just helps show how that hotel lobby would work, for example. So the first floor mezzanine, you'd be able to stand and look down to the entrance. You walk into the lifts. Turning to some site photographs. So this is looking at the site here on Hartfield Road. And again here. Building heights, so obviously it is lower down than this building here in terms of height. View from Graham Road. So the site starts here, going this way. On Beulah Road, looking back, you can just see the office building there. And this is the closest residential flats to the scheme, which is set at the back. The nearest elevation proposed at the rear wouldn't go beyond this elevation here. So that's just to help assist that. If I could turn members' attention now to the mod sheet. Page 3, so you'll see that we've amended paragraph 6.3, where we did receive amended plans and did a full reconsultation with some additional objections there, in summary, and some letters of support. and some additional condition 37 and amended condition 34. Members, overall, the proposal would provide a new building of larger scale than existing. The new building would provide replacement ground floor units with appropriate flexible town centre uses. The scale, form and design of the building is considered to be suitable to the site and surrounding area. The proposed hotel and ground floor uses would benefit from an on-site servicing access road. The design and scale of the proposal has been designed to ensure the greatest bulk and mass fronts Hartfield Road itself. The design review panel gave a green verdict for the building's design prior to submission, and officers during the current application have sought improvements to the proposal to achieve a high quality design. Council's local plan policies support hotel provision in town centre locations such as this site. Officers therefore recommend permission be granted subject to conditions and the Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Can I call on Lily Kotsana, please?
Dear Councillors, this application has attracted extensive opposition on several different grounds, calling for it to be rejected. What I would like to specifically focus on this evening is safety. It is currently proposed that Graham Road will be used as an exit point for all the service vehicles that will be servicing the site. As per the planning officer's recommendation, such access will be permitted between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. 24/7 all year round. What we can't see from the proposal or the recommendation is what analysis has been carried out on the safety risks arising from this use, and more importantly, how these risks are addressed. Let me give you some quick facts about Graham Road. It is a feeder road for two large primary schools, Dundonald and Wimbledon Chase. It is flooded with young children. Please just look at the photos that I've submitted. The number of young children seen walking or scootering along Graham Road on a daily basis is simply overwhelming. It is a quiet and narrow residential road, and at the moment the safest route into town for young families. Despite all of these facts, the plans, and sadly also the recommendation, fail to acknowledge the serious safety risks inherent in this proposal, not to mention address them. How has the Council satisfied itself that the core strategy policies 18 and 20 relating to safety have been complied with? What steps have been taken or conditions imposed to ensure that the safety of pedestrians, including young children, will not be compromised? The recommendation expediently assumes that every truck exiting the site will naturally choose to turn left towards the city centre. This is not correct, as any trucks with a destination towards east or south will be guided to drive through Graham Road. It also states that there will be a condition for vehicles to be encouraged to turn left. There should be enforcement and not encouragement. It assumes that only 3 to 4 vehicles a day would service the site. How is this substantiated? At the moment, there is no indication of the nature of the retail stores that will form part of the development, so making an assumption of their servicing needs is ill thought out. More importantly, it is assumed that there are no other solutions. This is simply not enough. The evident lack of an appropriate safety analysis and mitigation plan, together with the other objections raised by residents, call for this application to be rejected. Even if this application is passed, which we sincerely hope will not be the case, it needs to be sufficiently conditioned so as to protect the safety of the local residents and, more importantly, young children. At the very minimum, the plan should consider appropriate alternatives which don't involve the use of Graham Road. For example, an on-site service bay on Beulah Road. Reduce the servicing hours so they don't coincide with peak or school hours and don't affect people's sleep. And if access through Graham Road is to be permitted, which we hope won't be the case, impose a left turn onto Halfrey Road and require the use of a gated mechanism to ensure the vehicles exit slowly. The recommendation falls short of this at the moment. This is an accident waiting to happen. Thank you for your consideration.
This application is repeating planning mistakes of the past, and we are fed up. The people of Merton are fed up that Merton Council continues to turn our communities and streets into cold, bland, piled-up slabs in our names. New local and national planning policy is being drafted and passed to stop this kind of approach. You also need to reject this application on height, mass, scale, and design. It contravenes so many policies I had to send them by email. Is this the right place for such a big hotel? Perhaps a smaller, lower in height, more character hotel, perhaps, but this is no such thing. Big hotels mean big servicing needs. Beulah Road is a narrow one-way track, of a modest one-way system. Hotel traffic would feed into Graham Road, a quiet residential crescent with family homes teeming with young children. We're told that 3 to 4 servicing trucks are needed every single day from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., including public holidays. The Premier Inn loads from the bus lane on the Broadway, not from the residential road behind, and this aspect alone should be a reason for refusal. My other concerns are there are no computer-generated images whatsoever connected to this application to show how a 29-metre tower right in the heart of Wimbledon town centre, 10 seconds walk away from the low-rise conservation area which runs parallel, will impact the town. What about the impact on the residential nature of Graham Road with its 2-storey houses? The setback at the 4th floor from the drawings looks very shallow, and the soulless proposal with its short, sharp, saw-like edges will dominate and degrade the existing character. But what about the visual aspect of this proposal? What is the design? When I asked the developer what is Wimbledon, he cited planners had indicated the fridge on the bridge and Pinnacle House, the 2 worst structures in Wimbledon, perfect examples of what not to do. The planning officers are basing the height of this hotel on the now out-of-character Pinnacle House. Pinnacle House began as a 5-storey red brick Art Deco building. It's not a new build, but a reclad, and when extended by 3 stories, it became Wimbledon's tallest building at 34 metres, painted black, mausoleum-like, cold, causing horrible wind issues. The design would create another white elephant ripping out the heart of Wimbledon. White buff brick will get grimy with all the carbon particulate, sharp edges, and a concave facade with repetitive windows. It's very similar to this building we're sitting in, the Civic Centre, which is an eyesore. The colonnades dominate and still instill a sense of safety, especially at night on Dundonald Ward's most crime-affected street, GBH, drug dealing. The hotel sits opposite a large bar. The hotel reception is still on the 1st floor, despite police advice that it should be at ground level due to drug dealing and prostitution. There's just too much wrong with this and nothing right. I urge you to refuse permission and send the applicant back to the drawing board. The planners are promoting an abstract vision of what should be, but rather than the natural way that we see this space. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Call on Will Rolleder, please. Is he here?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight in support of this application. My name is Will Rolleder and I'm from Reef Group. Before you tonight is a vote of confidence in your borough. This is a £50 million investment in Wimbledon. It will create up to 150 new jobs, as well as providing a significant boost to the range and quality of visitor accommodation in the borough. Councillors, this application has been submitted to fit the requirements of your emerging local plan. In that plan, this site is allocated as a hotel and retail. We have listened long and hard to what local people and your officers had to say over the last 3 years about our plans, and as a result, we have evolved the scheme into what is before you tonight. People were concerned about the height of the building. We have ensured that the height is lower than the next door Pinnacle House. Indeed, it is some 5.5 metres lower than Pinnacle House, which is greater than the size of a double-decker bus. Your officers have stated that the height is acceptable and that the building would not be visually overbearing. An appropriate transition between buildings either side, paragraph 7.2.8. The building is of a high-quality design, paragraph 7.2.10. Your design review panel gave this scheme a green light. Concerns were raised about the servicing and delivery arrangements exiting onto Beulah Road. We held long discussions with your officers and revised the delivery and servicing arrangements to remove potential conflicts in response from local residents and businesses. To confirm, vehicles will exit the site turning left onto Graham Road and then left onto Hartfield Road. We have listened to comments about the proposed materials for the side panels and have decided to replace the originally planned mustard yellow panels with a more expensive coloured feature brick. Some were concerned about the aesthetics of the flat roof, so we changed the design on the Hartfield Road elevation to a curved roof to better enhance the street scene. We will also be providing new commercial units as well. Councillors, as you will have seen, Diana Stark, the CEO of your Chamber of Commerce, has written in support of the application. She emphasises how this scheme will support the economy of the town centre. We have striven to make this 177-bed hotel environmentally friendly. We have built into the design both green roofs and photovoltaic panels. We have taken advantage of the town centre location with its excellent P-Tower rating of 6B to make the development car-free, which will further reduce any environmental impact. We will achieve and exceed BREEAM very good. Some people have commented about the treatment of the existing tenants. In fact, the existing tenants are more than happy with the deals agreed. It is true to say that the application would not be before you tonight if landowners and tenants alike had not willingly participated. Councillors, tonight you can vote to have a vibrant, thriving town centre, a place where new jobs and investment occurs, a place where visitors want to stay and spend money. Please support this scheme and vote in line with your officer's recommendation to approve. Thank you.
Do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up a few points, really. Obviously, design, mass, scale of the building, that is a judgment. A judgment we have to make. The design has been designed to stagger down as the road falls away from north to south. The design, they had been to design review panel before submitting the application, which is encouraged by us, getting a green light on its design. In terms of servicing, the original application did propose servicing just off Beulah Road as per existing. Following discussion with highways officers, it was considered better to actually create a through road to help get the vehicle and service vehicles off the main road of Beulah Road. You have Champion Timber opposite, which does pose difficulties with a large vehicle coming in and out of that. The delivery and servicing plan submitted indicates that vehicles will be coming out and turning left on Graham Road. The staggered nature of the building, we think is good design, staggering it away from sensitive properties to the west. So overall, we consider that the scheme to be suitable. Thank you.
Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Chair. Many local residents have contacted me as ward councillor with concerns about this application. You've heard tonight from two very eloquent speakers of why they feel this should be rejected by the committee tonight. But I wanted to amplify an aspect of the evidence from residents and local businesses. If you are minded to approve it, I hope you take my comments into account, but I think the speakers have given some very good reasons to reject it. So my point is the impact on pedestrian safety, picking up on the evidence from the speakers. Quite simply, this is not an easy site for delivery and service vehicles. The initial plans, as you've heard, had to be changed owing to the potential traffic difficulties. Service vehicles were going to have to reverse onto the site with banksmen on Beulah Road, which is a one-way street off the main Hartfield Road, and that risks traffic jams back onto Hartfield Road. And the solution that they've proposed is essentially a through road behind the site, Beulah to Graham, with an exit onto Graham and then hopefully left, and left again back onto the main road. Quickly skimming through the rules that I'm sure you're all very familiar with, the National Planning Policy Framework, Paras 91 and 92, talk about planning positively for the use of shared spaces. So you are crossing a pavement on a pedestrian run through into town. In terms of Merton's planning rule, CS20 says that applications shouldn't be approved where they have adverse effect on the level of on-street parking, road safety or local amenity. And at a lower level, DMT5A requires that developments prove they minimise any impacts on the safe movement of people or goods, are appropriately located and connected to the road hierarchy, respect the street's character and environment. We've heard tonight that there won't be many service vehicles, but in correspondence with the case officer, he told me it should be noted that the number of proposed vehicles servicing the site set out in the submitted delivery and servicing management plan is an estimation, so it's possible there could be more or less vehicles each day servicing the site. And he also told me that the servicing plan isn't enforced as such. So I'd like to draw the committee's attention to condition 32 set out in the officer's report, which is the limitation of service vehicles between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. So residents in your packs, the evidence you've got, and the residents here tonight have mentioned the number of parents and children using Graham Road. It's the main cut through to Wimbledon town centre, as well as local schools and nurseries, and mornings are a key time. Similarly, you'll see from your pack local businesses on Beulah Road, Waterfall Garages, Champion Timber have raised concerns because their main times for customers are early in the mornings. And on this evidence and on the basis of DMT 5A, I'd like, if the committee is minded to approve, which, as I said, I think there are reasons not to, if it is minded to approve, that you look again at condition 32 on the hours of service operation, which I believe is an option open to you, and also again to any limitation on the right-hand turn onto Graham Road, which would drive traffic back through a residential road and a pedestrian area. Thank you very much.
Questions? Councillor Dean.
The officers mentioned that this had been to the design review panel. Can you tell me how many times it was there?
I don't know the answer to that question, Chair.
Sorry.
And in those three, what were the opinions? You have red light, amber light, green light. What were the opinions in the first one, the second one and the third one?
Don't know. I don't know, Chair. We have set out the green light.
No, you have, but I was interested. You said you've been speaking to them for 3 years, and it's been to the design review panel 3 times. I'd like to know what the outcome of those meetings were, but you don't have that information. But I'm assuming if you don't have that information, the reason it went 3 times is because it was red or amber. I can only assume. Okay, no comment on that. Tell me, in terms of the roads, Beulah Road, Graham Road, and this is one for transportation, and Hartfield Crescent, which will be used potentially here. What's the restrictions on lorries along those roads?
That's one way on Beulah Road, and the restrictions on Graham Road is there is a restriction to stop the shortcutting of heavy goods vehicles over 7.5 meters, and they are allowed to do the services within the Graham Road. That means load and unload, but not going through the Graham Road.
So specifically about Beulah and Hartfield Crescent, though, the weight limit on those 2 roads, and specifically the turning circle at the end of Beulah Road for lorries that are servicing more than 7.5. What's the turning circle at the end of that road?
The end of the Beulah Road, that's the reason that we manage or requested the applicant to have a service road to the rear of the development to avoid heavy goods vehicle turning right onto Beulah Crescent. And so that is a very acute angle. So there's a Dundonald Road with restriction as well. And that's the reason the applicant has asked, or we suggested, the rear access should be onto the Graham Road.
But what I'm trying to get to here is, except I don't always pick up every detail, but I can't see in here any restriction on Bewley Road. I accept you've had a conversation, but because there's a 7-foot barrier on Hartfield Crescent, and if a lorry goes down Beulah Road, it can't carry on, and it can't turn into Hartfield Road, but there is no restriction here. I mean, here's an example for you. So the servicing takes place behind, and a taxi turns up, and or a coach turns up, and it can't go into that servicing area. It can't go backwards because Beulah Road's a one-way street. It can't go forward because there's a weight limit. It can't go forward because there's a 7-foot barrier, and it can't go forward because there's a turning circle issue. But nothing in here legally can stop that large vehicle going down Beulah Road. But what does it do from there? Either it breaks the law. Well, it does. It'll have to break the law. So what I'm asking is, what are officers, transport officers, going to do about that?
The reason, as I said before, the service service access is being to the rear of the property or development, and that avoids heavy goods vehicle turning on Beulah Road or carry on further Dundon Road where the restrictions are. So it's highly unlikely the heavy goods vehicle will negotiate that road.
I'm so sorry to keep passing on this, Chairman. So does the taxi park, can a taxi park in the bus lane in front? There's no parking between the bus lane and the service road on Beulah Road. So if a taxi parks in the service road, what is the lorry to do? The service road, is it enough space for 2 cars, for a lorry and a taxi, or not? I'm trying to understand what a lorry does when it is stuck, because it can't go forward, it can't go backwards, and the predetermination here is that there will never be any lorry on the road, the service lorry road, which means there, ergo, there can be no deliveries.
Chair, it's not supposed to. The taxis are not supposed to use the service access. It's purely for the service vehicles. Taxis will have to look elsewhere to drop off and collect.
Sorry about this, Chair. Is there a transport plan for taxis to get people to this hotel? Not everybody comes from Wimbledon Station. Not everybody can walk. Is there a transport plan for taxis for this location? Because Beulah Road and Graham Road have no parking at all for taxis.
Chair, it's a highly sustainable location, 6B. So there are the adequate transport links. There might be taxis, and it will be similar to the other hotels, nearby hotels. They had dropped the taxis and then, collect and drop the customers. The bus lane, they can use it at off-peak times.
Thank you. I've got a number of questions. The first one is about 611, where it says that the Metropolitan Police have raised some concerns. In fact, the Metropolitan Police raised a whole number of concerns, and some of which I understand from talking to officers have been dealt with. I wonder if we can be told, are there any outstanding issues which the Metropolitan Police have raised, which haven't been dealt with? In particular, they have some concerns about the first floor reception area because they think the ground floor may lead to a kind of antisocial behaviour. So could you comment in general on all of the issues raised by the Metropolitan Police, and in particular on the one about the first floor reception, please? And then I have some more questions.
Thank you. Yes, so looking at the Metropolitan Police's response, we have actually proposed an additional condition 37. That raise issues of security, CCTV, also including a particular type of bomb blast resistance glazing. So we have included condition 37 on the modification sheet,
right, which
would capture that. In issues of the antisocial behaviour, the hotel, the condition will actually include security measures for within the hotel itself as well. So whilst the entrance is at ground floor level, there is the mezzanine above, which does provide a natural source of overlooking to that area. So in weighing it up, we don't think that is going to be a sticking point on the scheme.
Okay, thank you. Can we just move on to the whole business about traffic, and particularly the concerns that have been raised about local businesses on Beulah Road and about children going to school and indeed lots of other people walking along Graham Road. In section 32, one of the conditions is that activities will take place between 7 and 11 at night. What powers does this committee have to alter that, to reduce the hours? Both later on, but particularly in the early morning. And we've heard several people have referred to the service and delivery plan and encouraging turning left. Is there more that we can do than simply encouraging? Can we go further than that? And then I've got one more point after you've answered that.
In terms of the hours of servicing, so the hours are like that because it has an on-site service vehicle road, which is somewhat quite unusual for a town centre building like this. So we have been reasonable on the hours of servicing. In terms of the whether we can force people to turn left as the vehicles come out of the servicing road, this is something we have discussed with our transport colleagues, and we can't force them to turn left. The delivery and service plan will be showing that and encouraging that, but in terms of enforceability, we can't force them to turn left. The proposal does include servicing doors here, so vehicles coming out, they will always be in a forward gear, which we think is better than reversing onto Bula Road. So, Saf, I don't know if you want to pick anything further up on that.
There's adequate turning sweat path. We checked the sweat path analysis for vehicles exiting onto Graham Road, and it's highly unlikely they will go onto the right, and they will go left onto that's the shortest route to Hartfield Road. And there's adequate turning area, and there is, as it is, there's established crossover there, and there could have been vehicles crossing the site already. By addition, there's highly unlikely there will be any added trips compared to we are thinking about 3 or 4 trips a day for the service vehicles. So it's highly unlikely there will be it'd be a modest increase. That's all.
I mean, thank you. I mean, to be fair, the 3 to 4 trips isn't written in stone. That just happens to be the amount that at the moment they've said. We don't really know. I've just got one final comment. I wonder if we could just go back to the photographs of the street scene that you showed. That one in particular, one of the concerns, I know that may just be the way that was taken, but one of the concerns I have is about the canyonization effect that I think one of the other speakers referred to. And you have another 9-story building there, it's going to make it even darker. And I don't think it's a particularly attractive building to start with, but I am worried that height of building will make it even darker. So thank you.
Councillor T.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. First of all, on 7.5.4, regarding the delivery and service plan, which also Councillor Fairclough pointed out, when it's prepared, what occupancy rate will it consider? Will it consider 50%, 75%, 100%? That's one question. And my second question is 7.5.3, where it says hotels of this type proposed are unlikely to attract guests arriving in large parties by coach. As such, very few coaches are expected to be generated by the proposed use of this site. Can you explain why this statement's been made? Because I would have thought, especially with the football stadium being built, you'll have lots of parties arriving by coach and staying at this hotel.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the servicing plan, we'll be looking at its review based on 100% capacity. of the hotel. In terms of coaches, I think really the officer, I can't really comment on that actually. So I think it's the fact that there is no coach drop-off. There is a lay-by opposite, but it's not expected to have a lot of coaches coming to this hotel.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you very much. The exit from the service road onto Graham Road and the encouragement for vehicles to turn left onto there, I'm assuming that service road is entirely one way for all vehicles coming in from Beulah Road and out onto Graham Road. And so if you're driving up Graham Road towards Hartfield Road, you cannot turn left into that service road because it's one way. So is it possible, and I'm not suggesting put it in a condition, but is it possible to put some sort of bollard in near that entrance which prevents a large vehicle turning right, because the turning circle they wouldn't have a small enough turning circle to be physically able to turn right, which would force all vehicles to turn left, because nobody would need to have that turning circle to come up Graham Road and turn left into, because it's a one way. So if you just put a bollard or other piece of street furniture there, you would be automatically forcing everyone to go left, unless they were the fabled taxi that might go along the back where it's not supposed to, which has a very small turning circle and could get round such a bollard.
There's possibilities. It's not enforcement by the highway, but the hotel. The applicant can do an signage exiting in and out sign within their property land, not within the highway boundary.
Councillor Dean.
What I'm hearing is because it's private land, the council has no jurisdiction. So this isn't going to be one way, it can be two way. And you can't stop cars turning left or right into Graham, nor left as it will be into Beulah. That's what you're saying. You have no jurisdiction, therefore they can have it two way if they wish. And
Correct,
therefore
yeah.
they would reverse if they wish,
It's
and
up
turn
to
right as they wish.
it's applicant to enforce it.
Yes, so that means that it can be two way. They can turn right into Graham, and they can reverse, and there's nothing the council can do. That's the facts, yeah.
Sorry, it's not two way. It's if the applicant make it one way. That's what I mean.
So can you make them ensure it's one way?
It's not designed to put it that way.
Can you make it one way legally?
Up to the applicant.
Yeah, so that says to me you can't make them.
Okay, are there any other comments, please, Councillor Making?
I've got a couple of questions. One is, how high is the plant compound on top of the building? And apart from the build, which obviously will disrupt things in Wimbledon, what effect will the application have on the residents of Graham Road when it's finished? And also, I've got a third one as well, about the metallic panels that are mentioned in paragraph 7 to 10 and reflection.
In terms of height of the building, we have set out the height of the building in the report. So the maximum height of the building to the top of the plant enclosure will be 28.4 metres on plan, with 25.9 metres high to the top of the roof. So the plant, 2.5 metres or so in height. In terms of the impact on residents of Graham Road, the site position is northeast of Graham Road. If you look at the location plan, it's probably quite good. you'll see that they are angling away from the site. They have staggered the building in terms of its height as it goes back, and you'll see the angle of the site this way as well. So overall, we're satisfied with the impact of the building itself on amenity. And I can't remember your third point, sorry. So the solar panels would be flat on the roof itself. So they actually haven't shown it here, but it would be form part of the discharge and conditions process.
Thank you. I think I can bring a little bit of experience to this, as it was my weekend and evening job when I was in sixth form working in a hotel. It was also my full-time job in my mid-20s. I worked in hotels. What I wanted to address actually is the 4 vehicles a day, roughly, number of vehicles coming in and servicing at the back. People have said it may be more than that. Well, it may be a little bit more than that, but understanding the hotel business, basically there'll be a linen truck once a day to drop off the clean linen from the day before and pick up the dirty stuff from the night before, once a day for linen. There'll be drinks and dry stores for the I presume hotel bar and restaurants. Once a week normally for drinks and dry stores. Fresher Foods will be a much smaller vehicle, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. I don't believe, however much you might want to scare local residents, that they're going to be 10 or more vehicle journeys every day. 4 sounds to me like a very reasonable expectation of the number of visitors, vehicle visitors, even if the 3 units there are all, for instance, cafe restaurants that have deliveries once a week of drink and maybe slightly more often with small amounts of foodstuffs. I do entirely believe, and with the acceptance from the applicant that the service road at the back will be entirely one-way, one to the end, and that they'll put a bollard in the end to ensure that vehicles coming out turn left onto Graham Road, all those things together deal with most of the impacts on local residents. But the main impact on local residents, I believe, to residents of Graham Road and Beulah Road and residents of wider Merton, is 150 jobs and a large and high quality commercial development in the centre of Wimbledon, which is lacking in quality hotels. And I think this is just, and it sits at the end of a residential street, but it's basically bang in the heart of Wimbledon town centre. If you can't put a hotel there, where on earth else in the borough could we put a hotel? This is a perfect position for it. It's a great addition to our borough. I cannot see a single good reason not to pass this application.
Thank you. That was a comment rather than a question. But do you still have a question, Councillor Attois? Sorry, Councillor Attois.
There's a question. I was just going to ask if we can put a restriction as to when the service vehicles pass through to try and alleviate the concern of safety for children using the area.
So we have got condition 32 which restricts the timings, but that is more for amenity purposes. As it is a service road off the main road on site, it is been a reasonably generous timings for the condition. If there was no servicing road, then we would be restricting them to outside of peak hours on Hartfield Road itself. So at the moment, we think that is the reasonable hours proposed.
Okay, I'm taking comments now. Councillor Southgate.
Yes, I enjoyed Councillor Ward's plea for jobs and prosperity. Indulge me, I shall miss Chutney's, Wimbledon's first vegetarian curry house. I shall miss the Mica Cafe, serving meat and 2 veg for many generations at a £5. And I'll miss Copperfields with its rows of tatty and rain-soaked books. But all of this is, I know, in the past. I think the important point, we have homed in on this, and the applicant has indicated a willingness to concede some physical management of traffic exiting the service road to take it up left on Graham Road. That is necessary because it won't take people long to twig that by turning right onto Graham Road and exiting at the far end, if they want to get down to Kingston Road and leave the area to the south, that is going to be an awful lot quicker than going around the entirety of Wimbledon's one-way system. So I think we need that to be physically engineered, just in the way that the exit from the car park on Hartfield Crescent is likewise so engineered that you can only turn left into the one-way system. So that's one concern. I'm largely reassured on the servicing frequency. I mean, I think 7 days a week, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. looks excessive, but if it's negligible anyway, perhaps that's not something we should worry about too much. But there is this real issue with the way that we must enforce traffic to turn left on Graham Road.
Well, a little bit of history, really, because what you've heard so far isn't correct at all. This isn't the town centre. It never was the town centre. You'll find that on Morrison's car park was housing. There's never been any building on Morrison's car park except for housing. This Hartfield Crescent and Hartfield Road and Beulah Road have always been housing. And you have a parade of small shops. The town centre starts across Beulah Road, and if you've looked historically, you find that's the case. This is residential, and I would be very disappointed if I lived on a residential road and found somebody put a 9-storey building next to me. A 9-storey building next to a house. That's exactly what's happening here. It's 9 stories, not 8 stories. And it's interesting that we hear about the access road as being that we can put some measures in. There are no measures that can be taken, none at all, and that's very clear. And if you live in this area, you will find that lorries do find their way round because they know that that's not against the law. Safety of children is sacrosanct, not just emotionally, but legally. And these are residential roads. They're not distributor roads. They're not Transport for London roads. They're not red routes. They are residential roads. And now you're going to get large lorries. It doesn't matter if it's 1 lorry or 4 lorries or 100 lorries. It takes 1 lorry to run over a child. And 1 lorry, when it comes around Beulah Road, because it's in the Hartfield lane, the bus lane, has got to swing round widely. And it will stay to the right, and it will have to swing round widely again. And if you think they don't turn right down Graham Road, well, I'm sorry. It's not the fact, because if they go down Hartfield Road, there's traffic. And if they want to go south, they go down Graham Road. And they will clearly do that. And this council has said tonight, officers have said they cannot do that. If you look at the requirement, I mean, when I sit in these meetings, if I'd never been to Wimbledon, it sounds like a shantytown, falling to pieces. We've got unemployment of 50%, and the place is just a disaster. Well, Wimbledon isn't a disaster. Wimbledon has plenty of growth in it, but this, at 9 stories, in an area which is residential, where clearly the transportation cannot be dealt with, it cannot be dealt with. 177 rooms on a tiny plot. For the first time I've ever seen in the 13 years I've sat on playing, the first time ever, the police involved, and there was not a satisfactory reply from officers on the position with the police. That was a vague response, and it's quite clear the police are still unhappy about this. And I'll tell you what happened at the design review panels, because I was there. They were read, not once, but twice. This building looks the same as the building that was put in when it was thrown out. Thrown out by a design review panel that back the building of large buildings in our borough. And if that's the case, there's something deeply wrong with this. And we should be rejecting this. This is far too tall. It's not safe for locals. There's no doubt that transport cannot be dealt with. We need to reject it on bulk, massing and size, and it should be thrown out tonight.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a proposal about condition 32, the loading and unloading hours, which currently are from 7 till 11 at night. And I'd like to propose that we change that to 10 in the morning to 10:30 at night. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, what I'm going to say will probably sound like rhetorical questions, but we've had loads of talk about turning right into Graham Road, and I feel potentially very sorry for some of the residents there, because we have had in the past restricted notices saying no 7.5 vehicles over 7.5 tonnes per axle weight can enter and leave these roads. I'd like to know how many of them have ever been stopped, let alone fined, let alone prosecuted, because I don't
We can answer that in this planning committee.
No, it's a rhetorical question.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just airing my concerns here. And for 33 years, I would say on average once a week, I actually used the timber merchants there, and I wonder if anybody, when they were doing surveys, asked champions why years ago they stopped having deliveries from there, because the lorries turning up were always getting stuck and always causing jams. I mean, the other question is about 150 jobs. I'd like to know how many do we imagine, how many of the employers promised will be local people, and how many of them will be coming by public transport? It's not a question, it's a rhetorical question. Those are my concerns here.
I think I want to move this to the vote. I think we've had quite a debate about have given us a green light, and we do pay respect to the design and reviews panels. If we were to reject this with a green light from the design and review panel, I think we could be in serious trouble on an appeal. I think we could. I'm going to move to the vote and see those in favour, please.
Chair, do we get to vote on my proposal that we change the conditions?
Well, first of all, let's vote on whether or not we agree the recommendation, and then I'll put that to you. I will put it to you. Well, then, if I put it to the vote, and if it isn't in favour, then you can put your amendment to reject.
Chair, the design review panel is not a legal body. It is not a statutory body, and you cannot say in any appeal what they say it matters. It does not, and you've got to be clear on that. Is there a legal officer here to back that up?
It's just common sense. Put it to the vote, please. Can I put it to the vote, please? Those in favour of the recommendations in this report, please show. Those against? Those not voting?
Sorry, that doesn't add up, sorry.
Doesn't add up. No. Should we start again?
Sorry.
Those in favour of the recommendations, please show. 5. Those against?
Oh, sorry, I didn't see Councillor Pearce. 3, yeah.
And those not voting? Thank you. So the recommendation is to approve, so the vote is to approve the recommendation. Can we now look at the hours of operation between, is there an amendment to adjust this from 10 till, what did you say?
10 in the morning till, so starting at 10 in the morning and finishing at 10:30.
Those in favour, can I have a seconder for that, please? Okay, those in favour? Those against? Then that falls. The recommendation for the application is to grant planning permission subject to conditions in Section 106 agreement. To agenda item 11, which is Wimbledon Stadium.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the application site here is located north of Plough Lane and west of Somerstown in the north-eastern part of the borough. The site formerly contained the Wimbledon Greyhound Stadium and other commercial uses, which have now been demolished. The site's surroundings comprise retail units to the south-east, electricity substations to the west, and various commercial units to the north and east. The proposal itself is for a variation conditions application under Section 73 of the original permission. The site was permission was originally granted in 2017. Proposal seeks to vary condition 3, approved plans, and condition 20, opening hours, and remove conditions 22, 23, 44 and 46, all relating to the cafe and creche. The proposed changes are set out on pages 150 to 156 in the agenda, but in summary, the main changes are provision of additional 28 residential units, amended mix of units, removal of creche and cafe from the stadium, removal of semi-basement level in stadium, amended design of the corner of the stadium, reduction in residential parking spaces and stadium parking spaces, provision of 19 retail parking spaces, and infill new residential block to Block A, an additional floor. Members, talking you through the plans, it is clearly a large site. The plans capture the whole site. In terms of the infill residential block that is proposed over this part of the site, this is the proposed basement plan. I do have a parking plan in colour later on in the presentation. Looking at first floor level, so where the symbol of D here is where the infill block is proposed to be. Other changes to the stadium, mainly this corner here, which I do have a 3D sketch to show you. I'm not including every single floor plan in the scheme, just a few. So this is jumping to the 4th floor level. Again, the infill block here. And 7th floor level as well. Turning to car parking. In the purple, light purple, is residential on the building A. This is all known as building A. The proposal includes the provision of orange here, which is retail car parking, which will serve the existing agreed retail unit, which is here. The squash club parking, which was in this position, has now been moved over here. And also a reduction in some residential parking within the scheme as well. Turning to elevations, it's been difficult to capture the elevations for you, but the infill block, which is here, symbol D, is here and here. You have the stadium on your left. Again, just some section drawings showing the stadium and block C. So this is the view of the elevation that would face internally to what's called the north-south street running to the east of the stadium. Again, there's the infill block here. So this runs that way and then it continues on all the way along. So this is looking at block B and some other sections of the stadium scheme. The walls of the stadium scheme have slightly changed in that some of the green walls would now be at first floor level above to avoid damage at ground floor level. And this is the elevations of the stadium scheme itself. We do have a sketch as to how this corner would indicate to look as part of the scheme. The original proposal had a curved edge to the edge of the stadium. So this would be the main entrance, which would be visible from the main public road to the south. So I hope that just assists with that visual aid. Turning to site pictures, the site is obviously a construction site at the moment. The Volanti site referred to in the report is this buildings here. Looking across the site, looking south, so you've got the Lidl and other retail units opposite to the south. Onto Somerstown Road, this is looking north. This is the Volanti site just next to us here. This is a bit further up, so on the left, behind the blue hoarding, is the site. Looking back the other way, just showing you some of the character of the surrounding area. And again, the pub on the north corner, that's just here, and this road runs to the north, which serves a number of industrial and light industrial units to the north. Members, I'll turn your attention to the modification sheet. You'll see that we had some late letters of objection received, and there's also some updates to the committee report. You'll see that we have summarised in detail and provided responses in detail to those. Further, we have proposed some updates and amendments to the report in particular paragraphs. To clarify, retail car parking, for example, at paragraph 8.10.7, it's a provision of 21 car parking bays. Also, at paragraphs 8.1.3, in terms of the key planning considerations, bullet points added is air quality and affordable housing within that list. In terms of the scheme itself, as outlined in the committee report, there's no definition of what may constitute a minor material amendment. Taking into context the original planning permission, officers are satisfied that proposed changes fall within this category. Having regard to the context of the original permission and taking into consideration the proposed changes, it's considered that these changes can be accepted and supported by the Council. The visual changes would be relatively minor when compared to the original permission, and internal alterations, loss of creche and cafe, and provision of retail car parking can be accommodated. Additional benefits do arise from this proposal, with the provision of additional residential units, including additional affordable housing, and mitigation measures for air quality. Overall, the proposal still represents a sustainable development in line with the adopted site allocations policy. Officers therefore recommend permission be granted, subject to conditions and indeed a variation to the Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
There's quite a lot of information on the modifications, which I think you should have an opportunity to look through. So I'm going to set aside 5 minutes for us to do that. I hope you're okay. If now I'm going to ask the objector. We've got 2 objectors and also have a Councillor Gretton here wishing to speak. So can I call on Sarah Sharp, please?
Chair, this high-profile application, which is the officer's words, not mine, has submitted a critical paper relating to the scrapping of the creche. Since September, I've been trying to find a document I saw as part of this planning application on the portal, which gave the applicant justification to remove it, the only community provision in this application. The applicant said, quote, having taken advice from the London Borough of Merton on identified need for additional creche provision at this location and consideration of market and operational factors around delivery of this use, it has been confirmed that there is no identified need and it's neither economically or practically realistic. The Council has confirmed that there is no identified need for additional nursery spaces to serve this area, unquote. So how can Merton Council's Childcare Sufficiency Report of 2018 state otherwise? Why is this report not included in the application, and who in the Council confirmed there was no identified need for additional nursery spaces to serve this area? Merton's own Childcare Sufficiency Report states that, quote, whilst the estimated population of very young children across Merton is decreasing, there are 3 wards, Lavender Fields, Figs Marsh and Wimbledon Park, that have the highest numbers of children under the age of 5, and also have planned or potential local development housing schemes of over 100 units or more. This may impact on demand for additional childcare provision in these local communities in the future. These are a few wards, Wimbledon Park and St Helier in particular, where available places do not meet demand. Chair, we have a huge development before us tonight, 632 new housing units with questionable affording housing levels, and we have to ask the question, why are these material facts not included in the officer's report? Why are you, as PAC members, not being made aware of the childcare shortages in Wimbledon Park? Who in Merton is advising otherwise? 2 FOIs, one that turned up with 3 emails and an internal review, and the second one that turned out 2,000 emails. And still that council document that was on the portal attached to childcare needs is not there. Where's the evidence by the applicant that the council did indeed advise that it was fine to remove the creche? And why is the council not asking the applicant to find another site for the creche within this huge development? In its own healthcare impact assessment of September 2015, point 510, it says the applicant is considering options for nursery creche provision on site and will seek to provide this where most suitable. So my question is, why isn't the council asking for the applicant to fund provision for much needed childcare in Wimbledon Park as was promised under this application? If not on the development, then perhaps elsewhere.
Sorry,
finally, where is the...
Sarah.
Thank you.
Call on Peter West, please.
Air pollution in London kills 33 people every day. And as I understand it, it kills about 8 people, 1 in 8 people in Merton. Of the committee before me, statistically speaking, that's 1 person. And in this room, in the last issue, it was 8 people. Because of this, London National and Merton planning guidelines require that any developments must be refused if it increases air pollution in an area that exceeds the EU limits. Even though this is a minor amendment, it requires an environment statement as if it were a new application. This must show that it leads to no increase in air pollution. The applicants have submitted an environmental statement, and they have modelled the NO2 levels in the future and in the past. The problem is that the NO2 levels in the past simply disagreed substantially with those measured by Merton Council. The applicants have tried to explain this away by thinking of the distance that between theirs and Merton's results. But this analysis also disagrees with that of Merton Council. Using DEFRA guidelines, we can calculate the errors in the modelling, and these are extremely large. We have taken professional advice from a professor of statistics whose speciality is in air quality, and he agrees with us. On behalf of the Wimbledon Park residents, Clyde & Co. have written to Merton Council requesting a good explanation of all these discrepancies. And this we have not seen. To summarise, the environmental assessment with this application disagrees with the past results, and it has large uncertainties. And as far as I'm aware, Merton Council has not resolved these discrepancies. As such, this application has a flawed environmental statement that does not stand up to scrutiny, and it really should be refused. At the very least, it should be withdrawn until these matters are resolved.
Call on Philippa Doughton, please.
Yes, good evening. Just to pick up on the 2 points raised there in the objections. The first one in relation to the removal of the creche from the stadium. There is a site proposal, adopted site proposal 37, that states what uses must be provided as part of this development. And that use is sporting intensification with enabling development. There is no reference to a creche in site proposal 37. But to be enabling development, it's got to be commercially sustainable. And we have been out, we've talked to potential operators for the creche who have indicated strongly that this is not commercially sustainable. There are severe limitations to do with the location of a creche, not a nursery, a creche within an operational football stadium that can provide no dedicated outdoor play space, which is a requirement. And it also has very limited access and drop-off facilities for parents. So on that basis, we've concluded that the creche is not commercially sustainable and have removed it from the proposal. There are still aspects of the scheme which are there for the community to enjoy. There's a squash and fitness club. There will be community uses taking part as part of the stadium. It's just that on that basis we have removed it. Turning to the issue of air quality, as do you appreciate that the application has been supported by a full assessment of air quality in the environmental statement addendum. We have used our well-respected and specialist qualified advisors on that, who have made a rigorous assessment of the latest air quality parameters and concluded that there are no issues. This is supported by common sense as well, in that as part of the proposal we're reducing both stadium and residential car parking. So that in itself is a sort of measure of the direction this is going. So we have reassured ourselves, we've scrutinised our own assessment of air quality, and we remain entirely confident that it will stand up, both in terms of its methodology and its conclusions. In terms of the benefits of the scheme, we are now able to provide 28 additional homes for people, and of those 28, 20, that's 70% of the additional homes are affordable and will be delivered by Catalyst Housing Association, who are our partner in this scheme. So I think that's all I have to say in relation to the residential side. I don't know if Mr. Samuelson would like to say anything in relation to the stadium football club aspect.
Well, the short answer is no. Nothing came up in the challenges that related directly to the football stadium, other than the crash which Mrs. Dalton has dealt with. So no, nothing to add.
Anything? No? Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Chair, if I could just refer to the very good bit of process which went on with the removal of the basement in the amended application. The Residents Association of Wimbledon Park asked that that be properly put to the Environment Agency, who assessed it properly and confirmed that removal of the flood mitigation measure was indeed acceptable. That's an example of good process, but I think what we've just heard is that on the it didn't make a great deal of sense, Chair, when the council was saying on the one hand, or the planning statement said that the council has said there was no need for any additional childcare capacity, but of course we have the very formal report of this council in the childcare sufficiency report that says Wimbledon Park does not have a sufficient number of childcare places. So when you have a very clear, diametrically opposed anomaly like that, really the best thing to do would be adjourn the application so that these major discrepancies could be properly addressed. And of course the other issue we've heard on air quality as well, and this is a recurrent theme, Chair, where the legal requirement is for developments to be less than 40 milligram per cubic metre for NO2, and what we saw here was the baseline data being very, very significantly less than the data which, of course, are set out in the air quality annual statement for the council itself, which showed levels very much in excess of the legal threshold of 40 milligrams a cubic metre. The application had levels of about modelled hypothetical levels in the 30s and low 30s, whereas the council's own data, and indeed of the very qualified residents who put up the diffusion tubes supplied by the council, in fact show a range of between about 45 up to 70. So where you have such a clear discrepancy on the NO2 levels, it's entirely appropriate that perhaps the application be adjourned so that we can have the right mitigation, the right understanding of actually what the NO2 impacts should be. And that's why we're suggesting, I think, Chair, there should be an adjournment. And I should say, Chair, that if for any reason there is not an adjournment, and if there is a majority vote in favour of the application, may I suggest as a condition, Chair, that having seen the very angular feature which and the removal of the much softer radial curves, which would have given so much more back to the community, that the panel consider reinstating the previous design, which, as by way of condition. I think we've got about £10 million of extra revenue coming through the 30 new infill apartment blocks. The 30 new units in the new infill block, of course, that will raise a lot of extra revenue. So it may be a very positive condition to, by way of design, to require the much softer, more pleasant radial curve be reinstated in lieu of the very angular feature which we've just seen up on the screen. So that would be a very beneficial, positive condition that could be considered using the extra revenue from the extra 30 or so units, Chair. Thank you.
Any comments? No? Questions? It's all going to be... Councillor McGrath.
Could you just clarify the position on affordable housing? I'm sure I've read somewhere that the new proposals have a much bigger increase in affordable housing, which I think was at a very low level originally, and I'm just not clear. So could you just tell us what the number before and after was, and a rough percentage as well, please?
Yes, so the original scheme proposed 60 affordable housing, 60 units. The current scheme proposes an increase of 20 to be secured within the Section 106 agreement. What is also proposed is an additional 100 as shared ownership units by the provider, the partner with Galed Home Catalyst Homes, are proposing to deliver those. Due to the viability of the scheme, they can't be tied within the Section 106 agreement for viability reasons, but that is their intention, and that is why the affordable housing shows that.
Thank you, that's very helpful. But can you just clarify? So the 100 shared ownership are not included in the affordable housing because they're not affordable housing?
They would be affordable housing, but they're not to be secured within the Section 106 agreement. So the intention is that they will be shared ownership units.
So they will count towards the affordable housing target of the borough?
Yes, if they are delivered as that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Main planning gain for this development was the stadium?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Southgate.
I'd like to follow up on the 101 shared ownership units. And I think the question here is whether we, Merton, have nomination rights to those, or are they effectively offered on the open market?
Yeah, if they're not secured within the Section 106 agreement, then we can't secure his nomination rights under that. So it is a benefit of the scheme, obviously, that they're putting that forward. It's just that we can't tie it down due to viability reasons.
Are there any other questions? Move on to comments then. Councillor Dean.
I know a lot of time was spent on giving great weight to this creche in the initial planning application. And I'm not a cynic, of course, as you know. I'm just surprised by this amazing about turn that suddenly the applicant has decided that this isn't required. But that's up to developers to spin their yarns. But what is disappointing is that the council hasn't looked at its own documentation. And if there is a statutory need in this area, then really what the council needs to do is ask for monies from the developer to replace what they promised in return for a planning application. Because as much as the stadium was an important part, so was the creche. A legally binding presentation was made and accepted by this planning applications committee for a creche. And this council has a requirement. There is a shortage in this ward, and the council should be asking for the monies to mitigate the promise, the legal promise, that a creche would be on this site. And I have a very good feeling that this is going to be passed, but I think it shouldn't be. This council should stand up for itself.
Are there any other comments? Councillor Southgate.
Quite a different aspect, and this relates to design and our own design officer's comments on page 186. She describes something a backward step in terms of design. I'm particularly concerned, and echoing Councillor Gretton's point, with the proposal to square the corners rather than retaining the original rounded design. I mean, I know it's, you know, we can't afford Zaha Hadid here, but if you think of stadiums such as Wembley's, such as the you know, the Olympic Stadium and so on, if you want it to look like a stadium, it should be of an oval shape. That would also be a suitable, if you like, reminder of the wonderful dog stadium that preceded it. And having sat on this committee for a lot of years, we've let enough things go that I now pass by and think, oh, we should have held out there. And this, frankly, it would be a great shame to compromise the design for what I feel is, I don't know, it's probably thousands of pounds, I know, but it's just going to be one of those things that you'll look at it afterwards and say, what a shame we did that. We haven't got any very good images here, but I've just got a feeling that looking at the plans, squaring it off like that, and we'll realise it was a mistake. So.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Dean.
Comments, aren't we? Sorry, comments. Yeah. So I propose that this council claws back money for creche and whatever is required around that creche in return for the additional revenue that this applicant is making through putting the extra properties on this.
Just on that, I'm very, very unclear what that proposal was. Very unclear. I think we need a lot more detail about what exactly this proposal is.
Or the
refer this committee to the report in 2018 by the Children and Young Families Department on the financial requirement needed to replace the childcare facilities in the area. That should be a specific number, and I'm not an expert in this industry, but it's quite clear the value of this number of creche facilities, and that specific number should be clawed back from the applicant.
Do you want to comment?
Thank you, Chair. So you'll see on in the modification sheet that we did seek a quite extensive view from our planning policy officer on this issue. The creche was added late in the scheme to add visual character to that north-south street. There is no current policy requirement for that creche to be within the proposals. That is why we are happy with it to not be in the proposals. In terms of clawback, you'll note page 235 onwards to 241, we set out all the Section 106 monies which is being provided with this development. Also, additional 28 units within the scheme would generate a little bit more community infrastructure levy money for the council. So our advice is that you can't to not add that clawback money for the loss of the creche, as it wouldn't be.
There's not additional S106 here. This is the S106 money, and you say it came in late, that creche. It doesn't matter. This council committee saw the creche at the presentation. Now, I accept it wouldn't have made any difference to the outcome, but the point is it was there for a reason. Was it there for childcare, or was it there to pass this application? And I believe the latter, and I think you should get a clawback. If you're saying to me, it can't be done, it won't be done, that's fine, but I think we should at least vote on it.
You think it can't be done?
Yeah, our advice is against that, but ultimately...
Do we actually have the legal... I'm not entirely clear that I still understand what it is we're being asked to agree. Do we actually have the legal power to ask for this money, or are we saying that money we would get will use for this rather than something else?
Do we have any further comments, please? Councillor Southgate.
I do feel quite strongly on this point about design. I think the only way I'm going to be able to take that forward is I'm afraid to propose refusal on grounds of compromised design. I do so in the full knowledge that this is a major scheme. I think it's something that could be addressed quite quickly and easily by the applicant, but and as I say, it is one of the, this is, stadia are important to the feeling of a town, the sense of community, and we just want to spend the few bob necessary to get this right. So I will propose, I think I have to propose refusal on grounds of essentially compromised design, if I can do that. Do I have a seconder? Doesn't look like I do.
Are there any other comments, please? In which case, I'm going to the move. Can we agree the recommendations? Those in favour, please, show. Those against? Not voting? Then the recommendation to approve is carried. We have a comfort break, please. We're all back. Okay. We're now on to agenda item 13, which is 52 to 54 Wandle Bank.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the application site is located on the east of East Road and to the west of residential properties which front Wandle Bank. The site currently comprises a mixture of light industrial units with 2 access points off East Road and Wandle Bank. The site surroundings comprise residential properties to the north, east and west, along with bus depot to the south and primary school to the southwest. The proposal itself is a variation condition application to an existing planning permission to provide an extra 11 residential units within the scheme. The proposal would result in an increase from 34 flats to 45. The proposal relates to Block A only within the scheme, which is this block here at the bottom. The external materials would be those as already granted previously, with the main change being the use of the roof void as habitable space to create the additional units. Cycle storage and bin storage facilities are proposed to be upgraded to accommodate the extra units. With the proposed increase in units, the proposal also includes 4 on-site affordable housing units, which includes 3 for social rent and 1 shared ownership, as opposed to the off-site financial contribution secured under the previous application. So members, talking you through some of the floor plans of the proposal. The original scheme was a full redevelopment of the site, which included the provision of some units at the back here and here for residential. At ground floor level was proposed some commercial units on this side of the building. That is to remain unchanged. The main changes are within the building itself, through some internal alterations to create the extra 11 new units. Each flat would have access to private outdoor space. A number of the units would be called duplex units set over 2 floors. So for example here, you can see there's a 3-bed flat, 3 bedrooms here at first floor, which have stairs down to their ground floor living space at ground floor level. Those particular units benefit from a small garden out to the rear. So second floor plan, third floor plan, again, some split level units are proposed. Use of an outdoor terrace at the rear on the side here. That was previously agreed as well under the previous consented scheme. The previous consented scheme had what I would call a sort of floating roof structure, which included, it didn't include habitable space, but it included some outdoor amenity space for the flats below within the sort of roof void. So the main change with this proposal is that it doesn't propose that now, but it includes that space to be habitable accommodation. Turning to the elevations, the general design approach of the building remains the same. The whole, the scale, bulk and mass of the building and height remains the same. That roof form stays the same here, so with the exception of putting in mixture of glazing and some balconies to accommodate the habitable floor space. On the other side of the building, again just showing that there. Turning to the sides, it really just shows in context as well some of the previously agreed buildings over here. This is a sort of section drawing showing where proposed balconies are proposed at top floor level. The actual standing space is set back from installed planters and with a privacy screen which will be obscurely glazed. This is a plan submitted just to demonstrate that the buildings at the back here are not to change. And that plan. They've also provided some 3D visual aids to assist with the assessment. So, whereas before up here it was to be balustraded but open, so outdoor space under the roof. What is proposed now is to infill this area here with a mixture of glazing and some external terraces as well. And again from here, so on this particular side of the building, originally agreed was the fans here, which are angled at a certain way, providing views away from neighbouring gardens here to these terraces. They are obscurely glazed, the fans, and they are retained as part of this application, so they're not changing as previously agreed. There are some external changes up here in terms of windows and the position of this little bit of the unit here. Turning to site photographs. This on East Road, looking at the site on the right. Again here, looking into the site. And again here. And really just standing back. On the left here is a school. They're the rear elevations of the properties on the road, and the site is to the right here. Again there. And there. Overall, Chair, the proposal will provide an additional 11 units to an already consented scheme. Officers are satisfied the overall design remains of high quality, as well as the standard of accommodation. The proposal now includes 4 of the units to be for affordable housing, including 3 social rented units. Officers have not identified planning harm within the additional units on the already consented scheme, and therefore recommend permission be granted subject to conditions and a deed of variation to the Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Catherine Herbert, please.
The original plan for 34 residential units and office space was already far too dense for the size of this site and the surrounding environment and amenities. Although the applicant describes this as minor material amendments, the increase to 45 residential units represents an additional 30% more units, which is a very substantial increase and overdevelopment of a relatively small site. The change from roof terraces to units represents an additional storey to Block A. This building already dwarfs the surrounding residential dwellings, and even on the developer's own drawings, the overlooking onto neighbouring properties is extended, leading to even greater loss of privacy and light infringement. The increase in cycle spaces and assumption that the new residents will form car clubs, which will cut traffic and parking problems, is utopian, and the developer's data that there is plenty of available parking space does not equate with our everyday experience. In the original application, the Council accepted £200,000 in lieu of affordable housing, representing 4 units. In this application, the developers will provide 3 units of social and 1 of affordable housing. This is still 4 units, despite there being an additional 11 units, so surely there should be at least 1 more social or affordable unit. My main concern is that the already high risk of flooding or possible subsidence in our properties will be exacerbated with this overdevelopment on a floodplain. The papers refer back to the flood risk assessment from the original application, but even in the most recent version of this, the vital measurements which would demonstrate the level of risk were still missing. Will the Council and Environment Agency really allow this to proceed without having all the relevant information to protect both the existing residents and the potential new homeowners? Or if these figures are now available, can they please be made public? In neither the application papers nor the Planning Department's assessment is any practical or design imperative given for the additional units, so there appears to be no reason for the amendment other than pure profit. I would ask the Planning Committee to please consider the blight that this amended application will add to the lives of the local residents, and for once look to preserving our right to enjoy our homes without fear of flood, structural damage, loss of privacy and light deprivation over the greed of developers, and reject this application. Thank you.
Please. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually Scott Hudson on behalf of the applicant. I'm the agent. Just like to note we fully support the officer's recommendation and a few issues and items to reiterate. First of all, the principle of redevelopment of this site has previously been agreed under the previous permission. The proposals are an amendment to a previously approved application to allow for the 11 additional residential units within the existing building envelope. Density proposed is still in accordance with the London Plan requirements. An updated parking survey was carried out by our transport consultants, which confirmed that there was adequate parking capacity within 400 metres of the site. Updated surveys were carried out overnight and during the day. This has been signed off by the Council's Highways Departments, as noted in paragraph 7.9.10. Future residents would not be entitled to parking permits. Private parking spaces to be provided on site will be made available to the family units only. The proposed amendments will have no further impacts on the sunlight and daylight results of the previous permission agreed, as it's within the same building envelope. There's no additional impact on overlooking to adjacent properties. Again, this is referenced in paragraph 7.5.3 of the officer's report. This remains as approved. The amendments will now provide for 4 affordable units on site where it was previously an agreed payment in lieu. I think it should be noted that that payment in lieu previously would not be sufficient enough to provide 1 unit on site. We are now providing 4 affordable units on site. So in summary, we believe there are a number of planning benefits: provision of additional housing units for the borough, provision of affordable housing now on site where previously it was payment in lieu, high quality design of the approved scheme has been retained, high quality residential accommodation continue with the proposed amenity space and play space provided, over 40% family accommodation, continued provision of the employment floor space and cycle parking spaces in accordance with the London Plan. I therefore respectfully request that the members approve this tonight. Thank you.
Do you have anything to add? Please. Councillor Makin.
I'm interested in the affordable housing element. They put, as I understand it, they put 11 properties, 11 new places on it. They've offered 4 affordable housing properties, of which they're basically the ones that were offered the first time this went forward. And as the speaker said, we've then actually got 11 new properties with no affordable housing in there. I wasn't on the panel when it was first heard, so I obviously can't change it, but can you tell me why we haven't gone for 30%, as we often do?
Thank you, Chair. The original application proposed only a financial contribution off-site. It didn't provide any affordable housing on-site, which was £200,000. The current scheme, which has been subject to viability review and reviewed by our assessor, shows that they can deliver 4 on-site units as opposed to the financial contribution. So it does propose 11 additional units, but there is a benefit of providing 4 of those will be on-site affordable housing as opposed to the original scheme, which was just a contribution.
I come back. 4 is about 36% of 11. That's true, but it's not of the remainder. And if it's 45 altogether, it's affordable housing of about 10%, which is not really what we should be aiming for. We should be aiming for at least 30, 25 minimum.
Any other questions? Sir Southgate.
Chair, thank you. I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, but we are told that very small allocations of affordable housing are not necessarily attractive to housing associations to manage. Can you comment on that?
Well, the proposal does include on-site. There has been no discussions of a contribution replacing that. So that's what's proposed. 3 specifically for social rent. So what if it was to be granted tonight, then that would be the affordable housing contribution to be sought on the site, and not a contribution.
That wasn't the question.
Yes, let me see if I can do a bit better. In the past, we have been encouraged to accept contributions in lieu on the grounds that managing just 2, 3, 4 units within a development is not very attractive to a housing association, that they would look to manage a larger minimum number of units.
I think for comfort, Chair, the scheme is it just provide for on-site. That is the offer, and that is what we'll be securing within the Section 106 agreement. It is a different area to some similar schemes, perhaps in Wimbledon, where land values are a lot different. So that is the offer this evening, is for on-site, and that's what we're looking to secure.
Chair, sorry. I wonder if we could just tease out from Councillor Southgate. Is Councillor Southgate suggesting perhaps that if a larger number of units could be delivered, but that didn't necessarily square with the council's preferred tenure mix, but was able to secure interest from a registered provider, are you suggesting that officers review how that affordable housing offer is configured? Because clearly from a developer's point of view, the social rented element of the scheme would be less attractive from a viability perspective than perhaps the shared ownership aspect of the scheme. But our policy is very much that we should seek 60% rented and 40% shared ownership. But we've got that conundrum there that if the scheme delivered, or if somebody ran the maths again and the figures actually turned out that you could get more units if they were shared ownership, but that didn't square with the council's policy. I just wonder, in which direction might Councillor Southgate be encouraging officers to explore?
Yep. No, Mr. Lewis imputes far more, far-sightedness than I would prefer that they remained as units for social rent. But that's pretty clear. I mean, I also, while I'm here, actually say that I'm very encouraged by the fact that the configuration, the number of bedrooms per unit is a welcome change, with 3 and 4 bed units to the number of studio and 1 bed units, and it does help just a little to redress the balance towards the provision that we would prefer to see. So no, I don't want to change the mix there, the tenure.
Ward.
My understanding, and officers will correct me if I'm wrong, is that there was a previous application where the applicants came to us saying we'd like to, it was on Wimbledon Broadway, I believe, they said they would like to provide social housing, but that they, as Councillor Southgate said, they may have a problem getting a housing provider to provide a small number of units in one block, and therefore as a sort of backstop they were saying if we can't find a good provider, we'll give you lots of money instead. I'm assuming that as this developer is not suggesting that, then they must be very confident that they will be able to secure a housing provider to come in and provide the 3 social housing social rented units, because they haven't said, if we can't, we'll give you some money instead, which is the previous application that I think Councillor Southgate is referring to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Has the applicant provided a financial viability assessment or analysis? And you've checked it and your conclusions are in line with them?
Yes, that's been submitted and reviewed by our assessor, external assessor, independently. So, yeah, that's all been subject to it.
Two questions. What is the affordable housing, the level of affordable housing which council officers proposed and all councillors voted for at this council currently?
Current policy. The starting current policy position is 40% on site under core strategy policy.
So the reason I didn't use the words current policy is I just wanted to be clear that it was officers and councillors that proposed and accepted that. Why hasn't the council spoken to this applicant about the current policy?
Yep. So
can you please just refer to it? Thank you.
So the starting point is always the development plan policy of 40%. If they can't achieve that, then to justify that, it has to be through viability reports, and that is independently assessed by our assessor. And so in that process, we try to seek as much affordable housing as possible. But government guidance is that we cannot refuse permission if the scheme is shows to be unviable with the level of affordable housing proposed in the local plan for a scheme. So they have gone through the right channels with the application in terms of us getting it assessed by a viability assessor, and that's what is come out as for this site.
Do we have a clawback mechanism on this?
Yes, that is included with the application. It is set out on page 318 within the variation to the legal agreement under the original permission.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good news that it's not a creche where we can't claw back, but it is a property where we can, so that's good news. Can I just ask one more question? At page 317 on Crossrail, is this the overrunning over budget Crossrail or the abandoned Crossrail that this money is going to?
My understanding is that is for the future Crossrail project that comes through our borough.
So on the basis that might be abandoned, and I'm sorry to say, I might be slightly cynical, what happens to the cash?
Yeah, that is a question for the mayor to answer, actually. So,
okay, so what I want to make clear here is that, not for now, because I know we haven't got the answer, is if the abandoned one doesn't go ahead, then is the applicant going to pass the money to an authority, or does the applicant keep it? You don't need to answer that now, but I want to be clear, because although I have a selective memory, I do have a memory, and I won't forget. All right.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Sorry, yeah.
Chair, just picking up on the concerns of members regarding the delivery of affordable housing, if we go back to policy 3.12 of the London plan, the approach there is the maximum reasonable amount of affordable housing should be sought when negotiating on an individual sites, having regard to, and then it lists a number of criteria. And point G is resources available to fund affordable housing to maximise affordable housing output. All I would add is that the council did collect money from a number of smaller schemes to deliver affordable housing. And perhaps rather than completely sort of cut across my colleague's report on this, which would be quite wrong, if members felt that it was worth minuting that the issue of looking at the funds available which the council holds and whether or not that's something which officers should at least take back to our colleagues in housing to see whether or not delivering extra units on this site would be good value for money, because at the end of the day the council can only use that money if it's demonstrated that it's good value for delivering the extra units. Then at least that would give an indication to officers that perhaps further discussions could be had on that particular matter. But it would just be something that could be perhaps minuted.
Okay. Any other comments? I'm going to move to the vote. Oh, you're not. Okay. Can I? Those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Those against. The recommendation it says variation of conditions subject to conditions and deed of variation to the 106 agreement is the recommendation which has been approved. Seven is the All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet Club. Pods.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the application site is the All England Tennis Club in Wimbledon Village, the main site. The application specifically relates to 5 existing clay courts on the main tennis site. The proposal itself is for the erection of 5 temporary air dome covers over 5 existing clay courts. The 5 domes are proposed to be erected for a temporary 3-year period between the months of September and May. The proposal is sought to provide covered courts for members of the tennis club that could be utilised whilst the redevelopment of the existing indoor courts facility at Somerset Road is under construction. Here's the elevation of the domes. Each dome would have obviously a dome shape with white appearance and green at the base. The height of each dome would be the same at 9 metres in height. Each dome would have internal light illumination and would be supplied air through a heat and inflation unit positioned externally at ground floor level on each one. So talking you through the plans, there's the air and heat units here on the side of the dome, there and there. The applicants proposed some street scene drawings. A number of them will be sited along adjacent to Somerset Road, 3 of them particularly, which is this view here. There is one on the other side, which is to the southeast of Centre Court here. And again, just some section drawings helping you show its height and its context. So this building here is in my site photographs, which we'll come on to in a minute. You'll note, so the Somerset Road is here. The actual site itself is slightly lower down than the road. So in terms of the dome's prominence, 9 metres high is, I'd say, a typical modern 2-storey house, for example. Obviously peaking at the top there, and the white appearance. That's the one on the other side of the road, so you just see it set far back from the road there. This is a section drawing just really showing the nearest neighbour to the site, which is 86A Marriott Road, which is here. You'll see the red line showing the section. So in terms of courts that would have the dome, it would be this one, these 2, and this one over here. Site photographs. So that's the pavilion building I showed you in some of the section drawings. So set to the right and beyond this one. Just a view further back. So there'll be one in the distance over here, a few beyond here, and further back again. There's the building itself. The applicants put forward some 3D, some visual aids. So this is them purporting what it would look like from the street, and again from further back. So you can just see how they've outlined the white domes here and here. Members, overall the proposal would provide covered courts for the continued use for a specific time period whilst the construction is carried out on the new indoor court facility opposite. The proposed domes are considered to be visually acceptable for this time period, and although artificial in nature, they're not considered to be visually harmful. Appropriate noise mitigation is proposed, and the Council's environmental health officers have raised no objection following receipt of that mitigation. Officers therefore recommend permission be granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? No questions. Any comments? Oh, we move to the recommendation then. Can we agree with the recommendation? Those in favour? Thank you. That's agreed. So the recommendation is carried. Wow, that was quick. Should have put that one on first. We now move on to agenda item 8, which is 356 Garth Road. Thanks, Tim.
Chair, if I can just start by setting out the application is before you this evening because of the number and scope of objections that officers have received. The proposals are similar to those that were considered at the Planning Applications Committee back in November last year. Proposals for an additional dwelling along the side of a semi-detached house on the corner of Wydle Close and Garth Road. You'll recall at that time there were concerns regarding the basement level element of the new unit, and the reasons for refusal that were cited in that particular instance focused specifically on the poor and foreshortened outlook and restricted daylight to the basement level living accommodation, resulting in a poor environment, or what members consider to be a poor environment for the future occupiers. The applicant has considered the reasons for refusal and has amended the scheme. You should have a drawing amongst. Yes, the drawing before you shows the differences between the two schemes, and you'll see the refused scheme where the hand is circling has a fairly modest light well, which is outside of where the basement level living accommodation was proposed. The revised proposals have a much larger light well onto which the occupiers will now look. In other respects, the proposals are the same, but I should add that it wasn't a matter of principle or the design of the building itself that formed the basis of the Council's decision. Officers have set out in the report at paragraph 3.5 the differences, and whilst the officers' report goes into some detail in terms of addressing the various concerns that have been raised regarding the latest application, because of the limited nature which defined the reasons for refusal, officers are now of the opinion that the proposals have overcome that earlier objection, that it would be now unreasonable to withhold permission, and that permission should therefore be granted subject to conditions.
So we had quite a debate on this last time, and it came in November, which is not that long ago. So I think it's for us to decide whether or not we feel it's gone far enough. So are there any questions? Councillor Southgate. Okay.
Just taking what the officer said, as it's not unreasonable to pass this, but there's no change in that because the officer said the same thing last time, didn't they? The officer has just said that they believe it's not unreasonable to pass this, but according to the documents, that was exactly the same position as last time. So there is no difference in their opinion, even though there is a change. So that's what I'm confirming. I'm asking as the question. Did you say last time to pass it? And have you said last time? Right, so it's the same position. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, Councillor Dean is right. It was previously recommended to us for approval, and we disagreed with that. And I guess this is the system working as it should. So the applicant has considered the reason for refusal and come back with a changed design. We just have to make a judgment whether an extra 1.5 metres in length of the sort of subterranean patio area is sufficient to overcome our concerns. I find that very hard to weigh up. You know, how would I feel? I suspect on balance we should accept that, actually. But I can't quite imagine how that would work as a livable space. Is that going to provide an adequate amenity area? Than what other members feel like.
Chair, I think the approach that officers will that I'll take with officers is literally to get a tape measure out in the office and find an area of the office that's enclosed perhaps by cabinets and cupboards where you've got a sort of a defining point with a window, measure the height from the floor to the ceiling, and really just try and visualise, for real, what that would feel like. You can see that I think that 1.5 metres extra, I genuinely feel will make a material difference. I acknowledge that our recommendation is the same as last time, that previously we felt that the proposals were satisfactory. But in this instance, I would really say I think it would be quite harsh. I think now with a patio area extending to perhaps 14 feet from the basement level living room, that somehow that wouldn't provide a reasonable outlook for the future occupiers.
I don't see it as an outlook. I think it's a difference in opinion. But what percentage of this house is underground?
Looking at the drawings before me, I would suggest that something in the order of 2/5 of the accommodation is at ground level, and that probably 3/5 would be at lower ground level.
In terms of your basement strategy policy, I don't know if it's a legal policy, but I think it's an SPG as far as I understand. You talk about basements being less than 50% of the proportion of the house. Was that the case?
Now, I think our policies look at actually creating extensions underneath gardens of existing houses. And in this instance, what we're doing is we're actually excavating an area at the rear of the property, really, I suppose, in a sense, working with changes in levels, because if you visited this, the site, you'll appreciate that the turning head at the far end of Wydle Close is lower than the junction of Wydle Close and Garth Road. So in a sense, the applicant and his or her designer is working with the lie of the land in this particular instance quite creatively.
Thank you. I remember discussing this first time around. The officers just said, and obviously an officer has to use that kind of language in saying that refusing this would be a bit harsh. My view is that we gave one specific reason for turning it down last time. They have come back and addressed that one specific reason. To turn this down tonight, I mean, bit harsh is an understatement. They've done all that work, and to specifically address the issue we had, and my view is they have addressed it, I don't believe we can turn this down now. It would be more than a bit harsh. It would be a kick in the teeth.
Well, at a previous planning committee, I think it was Councillor Ward was referring to the problem we have, that we shouldn't turn something down just because we wouldn't want to live in it. And I think he referred to some places that he'd lived in the past, which I think we were planning to turn down something similar. I've lived in a basement flat, which was absolutely fine. And it seems to me I couldn't possibly vote that somebody else shouldn't be able to have the opportunity to live in this flat just because I might not want to live in it nowadays. So I think we should go for this. I certainly intend to vote for it.
Fine, I worked out it's around 17.5 square metres of amenity space, which sounds okay, does it not? I mean, we would work on 5 metres per habitable room for a flat, so it's more than that, but it's less than we would want for a house, obviously. But
Those in favour, please show. Those against, not voting. Recommendations carried. 58 Haint Walk.
Members, if I can just draw your attention to a late letter from the applicant, which I believe has been circulated before the meeting, and the modifications sheet. You'll see again the reasons for this being brought before committee is the range and number of objections that have been received. The proposals in this instance, again, the formation of one additional dwelling. You'll see from the officer's report that there have been a whole host of objections raised in this particular instance, some relating to planning matters, others relating to matters such as impact on property values. But again, this is something where there's some considerable planning history, and that may well have had a bearing on the input that we've had from residents in this particular instance. The planning history that's set out in the officer's report takes you back to 2015, when officers first received proposals for a detached dwelling on the site. And if you turn to page 128 of the report, you'll see that that was refused for some fairly broad reasons, with really design being one of the key aspects that officers cited, the proposals being considered quite out of context with its surroundings. We then move on to a scheme in 2017, which was for the erection of a two-storey end-of-terrace dwelling. So effectively, if I can take you to the photographs of the head of the cul-de-sac, effectively extending this pair of semi-detached dwellings by really a jelly mould addition at the end to provide, rather than a pair of semis, a short terrace of three. At that time, officers felt that the proposals would be out of context with this part of the Haint Walk street scene. But in response to that, although the application went to appeal, and although the appeal was dismissed, the planning inspector was less than supportive in terms of the impact of an additional dwelling in this particular location. And you'll see halfway down page 128, the planning officer has taken some text out of the inspector's letter, and it notes, however, it would be in a secluded position with restricted visibility from the street. In this regard, any loss of symmetry within the site would not be readily perceptible from along most of Haint Walk. The design of the proposed dwelling would also be consistent with the existing semi-detached pair. For that reason, for the above reason, I conclude that the development would not significantly harm the character and appearance of the area. So the inspector here is still refusing the proposals because of the perceived impact on neighbouring properties, but isn't so much saying that putting an extra dwelling in this location would necessarily be harmful. We then move on to a 2018 application, which again officers have refused. But in that particular instance, if I can take you to the plans for the site, and if you see where the hand is circling here, the red line which runs pretty much north-south and creates a modest but adequate garden for 58 was in fact orientated along the rear of the proposed dwelling, and then ran off in an easterly direction. So you had pretty much a stubby L-shaped garden with the first floor windows of the proposed property looking straight down into the garden of 58. That application has also gone to appeal, and we're awaiting the decision from the planning inspectorate. But in the meantime, the applicants have put in this latest application, which will now be the fourth application on the site, with a different arrangement to the garden boundaries. So now the first floor windows of this property would look down onto the reconfigured back garden, which would mean that it would be no longer looking onto the garden of 58 Haint Walk. The changes to the front of the property at first floor level are such that the windows for the bedrooms would look eastwards into this large garden area, and there would be obscured glass to a higher level, again roughly where the hand is moving, so as to avoid a loss of privacy towards the back of 56 Haint Walk. The setback is also significant. The setback is around 1.5 metres from the front of the property, and again that was one of the issues that the inspector did fix on, and that was the visual impact of this additional dwelling on the amenities of 56 Haint Walk. So through a series of steps and amendments to the scheme, the applicant has now come forward with proposals which, in terms of their impact on neighbouring properties, would appear to have addressed officers' concerns. The scheme is different in as much as it's not entirely the same as the scheme that was before the inspector when the inspector refused permission, where the building aligned with the front of the neighbouring property. And again, it's a matter of judgment as to whether or not the new roof form is successful. But again, given the inspector's comments regarding the buildings being tucked away and secluded, it's debatable whether or not, again, a slightly disjointed roof form in this instance would carry such weight as to get the support of an inspector at appeal. So as a consequence, notwithstanding the objections that have been received or the reasons that the Council has up until now cited in terms of seeking to resist the proposal, as I've said, through a series of steps, the applicant has now got to a position where officers feel that it would be unreasonable to withhold permission, and therefore permission is recommended subject to conditions.
Questions?
I have a question. Two questions actually. One of them is on process. I hope we don't have a problem with answering hypotheticals. If we pass this, give approval to this evening, and the appeal lodged on the decision made in November is then successful, would they in effect have two valid planning permissions for two slightly different schemes on the same site and could choose which one they wanted to build? And secondly, as the appeal, I understand, is on a delegated officer decision, this is a question I'm not sure you will be able to answer, but do you have a level of confidence in that appeal upholding your initial decision?
Chair, if members were minded to approve this scheme and the inspector allowed the appeal, then yes, there would be two different permissions that could be implemented on the site. I'm sure you'd appreciate I can't really second guess how an inspector will approach this. It was quite disappointing that the inspector took the view that actually putting in another dwelling in itself and how that affected the symmetry of what's actually quite an orderly municipal housing layout could work. But we've had to shift our position, but I would like to think that the inspector could see sense insofar as the scheme that we have refused did have windows looking straight down into this garden, and my recollection was that the configuration and layout of the rooms was such that if you relied solely on obscured glass to maintain your natural light from this side of the building, then really it would be like, well, you wouldn't really have an outlook from those rooms. You'd just be looking at obscured glass. So the flip side to that is remove the obscured glass and put the windows somewhere else. But because of the way in which the previous layout was configured, that in turn would give rise to overlooking. And so that's why officers felt we had to refuse the scheme.
Any other questions? Councillor Makin.
On the same premise as Councillor Ward, if we accept the scheme and put some conditions on it, and the planning inspector accepts what was put before them, will that mean the applicant has the opportunity to not bother about the conditions that we put on if they decide to go with the other one? Do you understand what I mean? If we make the decision tonight and we put some extra conditions on the document that are not on the other one, then not only does he have the choice of which one to take to do, he also presumably can choose the one with the conditions on and not. Pardon? I was going to mention a couple of conditions about road repair, which is possibly on the other one anyway. No, I mean, it's, and the documentation that I was reading from residents was talking about hedges and fences and all sorts of things, and the actual entrance to the properties. If you go back to your original picture of the site, then you've got that entrance to get into 58 and 56 at the moment, which needs repairing in some ways. Can't we put that on as a planning condition or not?
Chair, at the moment, I suppose I can understand why members may be a little bit apprehensive about endorsing the revised proposals. As I said, the way in which the garden was configured running in this direction on the last scheme meant that the key thing from officers' perspective was to ensure that the windows didn't overlook that garden. Now, the new proposals could allow perfectly clear glass along here. But again, it would be rather perverse to put to suggest an additional condition is put on for the first floor windows that somehow they should be obscured glass in case the garden layout wasn't as per the drawings. The fact of the matter is the inspector will be asked or will be required to make his or her determination based on the submitted plans and nothing else. And whilst I can appreciate that residents may feel that the council's processes in terms of enforcing planning controls are perhaps not as speedy as they may like, breaches of condition are matters which planning officers will pursue quite properly, and if it's considered that a breach of planning control is such that it results in material harm as a result of perhaps direct overlooking of a garden space because the garden boundaries haven't been properly configured, then a breach of condition notice would be served and appropriate enforcement action would follow.
Councillor Chung.
wonder if you can give me clarification on this point, which I think is what I heard you say. The property at the moment, overlooking number 56, there is 100% privacy guaranteed with the existing arrangement as it stands at the moment. Is that correct?
Chair, as things stand, the building that my hand is circling on the plan doesn't exist, and that therefore the windows at first floor level in 58 look simply towards either the flank wall or the corner of the front of 56 Haint Walk. And so in that respect, there's not even a sense of overlooking, because this building simply doesn't exist.
If there are no further comments, I'm going to move it to the vote. Is that okay? Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. It's unanimous. Okay, then the recommendation's approved. So we now move on to agenda item 12, which is land adjacent to 65 Sherwood Park Road.
Chair, if I can just start by referring members to the modification sheet for this particular case. Again, if I can explain, this application too has been the subject of a number of objections, and some of those have related to the principle of development, so matters that cannot be overcome by attaching conditions to a planning approval, and as such, the scheme's been brought before committee for determination. This proposal is to erect a new building at the end of a terrace fronting Sherwood Park Road on the parcel of land outlined on the site location plan. You'll see the proposal would attach to an end of terrace property which is characteristic of this area, quite an interesting configuration with projecting bays and hips and cat slide roofs, quite a distinct corner plot.
Cat slide roof, did you
Cat,
say?
yes. What did I say?
Cat slide.
Yes. The proposals, again, are for not simply a new end of terrace dwelling, but the creation of two separate smaller dwellings, again with some accommodation at basement level. You'll see at section 5, page 279 of the committee agenda, officers have identified various objections, again, in terms of this particular proposal. The proposals would, as a matter of principle, deliver more housing, for which there's an acknowledged need. But, as we've said in the committee report, the Council has demonstrated in its annual monitoring report that the amount of housing being delivered is exceeding the London Plan's housing targets, and to that end, it's quite reasonable that officers apply design considerations quite thoroughly and don't set the delivery of housing above all other considerations. Having said that, in this particular instance, the proposals would integrate quite effectively with the existing text. Oh, sorry. It's the officer's judgment that the proposals would integrate quite successfully with the existing terrace, retaining some space around the corner, and by reason of breaking down the bulk of the building, wouldn't present an overly bulky and intrusive form. In terms of neighbour amenity, the proposals would look towards the rear garden, the flank wall of the neighbouring property on the road to the side. So if I can just again move the hand, there's a parcel of land just beyond this which is free from development, so the accommodation would look towards that. And then if I can just go back a little bit further, yeah, you can see some distance away is the flank wall of the nearest house in, I think it's Franklin Close. So again, no issue there with overlooking or loss of privacy. In terms of the size of the units, the proposals would meet the national standards. In this particular instance, the applicant has provided a lighting report, a report to assess the light that would get into the accommodation at basement level. And what the report does is looks at the key criteria, vertical sky components, average daylight factors, uses a recognised methodology used by the Building Research Establishment, and again comes up with figures that would suggest that the proposals would meet nationally recognised standards for good levels of natural light. Again, in terms of garden space, too modest gardens are proposed, but the 2 units would comprise flats, so in that respect the proposals would provide gardens well in excess of the GLA's minimum standards. In terms of parking, there's no parking provided on the site, but the area is not one considered to be suffering from parking stress. So again, the absence of parking would not be a sound reason to refuse permission. Cycle storage is provided, refuse stores are provided, the basement has been assessed in terms of structural integrity, and you'll see there are there are conditions proposed to be attached to any decision, and again permission is recommended subject to conditions.
Questions? No questions? Comments? Goodness me. Councillor Southgate.
It's late, I know. No, it's just I don't think there's anything we can fault here. It's just a shame it couldn't have been one decent-sized family house rather than being split into 2 flats in this way. It really is. You know, you look particularly at the rear. Those small rear gardens are going to be all fences and bin storage, aren't they? Yeah, but they are.
Chair, if I can just say that the proposals had, or the site had been the subject of pre-application inquiries, and that had been our suggestion.
No further comments? Okay, we'll move to the vote then. Those in favour, please show. Those against? And the recommendation is carried. We now move to agenda item 14, which is planning appeals. This is just to note. So how many have we had allowed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 dismissed and 5 allowed. Just to note that, and the planning enforcement report, agenda item 15 again. any issues anyone wants to raise? I think Jonathan will take them back. No? Okay, well, can I thank you very much for your attendance this evening?